You've been lied to about gratitude. They told you it's just saying thank you when someone does you a favor, or smiling politely even when you don't mean it. But if that were true, why do so many people who say thank you every day still feel empty inside? Why do you, even with food on the table and a roof over your head, sometimes feel restless, anxious, always waiting for something more before you can finally feel content? The truth is, gratitude isn't about manners. It isn't about pretending everything is fine. Real gratitude is deeper. It's a way of seeing the world, a shift in the heart, a quiet power that turns even ordinary moments into miracles. And Buddhist wisdom holds the blueprint. For centuries, monks, teachers, and seekers have discovered how to be grateful not only for the good, but also for the fleeting, the painful, the imperfect. They learned how to look at every breath, every step, every sunrise as a gift, not because life is easy, but because life is precious. Tonight, as you listen, something inside you will soften. The noise in your mind will quiet down, the weight you've been carrying will feel lighter, and your heart will open. You'll feel a kind of peace that doesn't depend on what happens tomorrow, because it's already here, inside this moment, inside you. And when you wake up, the world will look different, brighter, kinder. Enough. This isn't just another sleep story. This is a doorway to gratitude, to freedom, to a way of living where every day feels like a gift. Are you ready? Let's begin. So far, you've opened the door. You've felt the pull of a quieter kind of gratitude, the kind that doesn't depend on what you own or who approves of you, but on how you see the world. Before we move further, let's step into the first lesson. It begins with one of the simplest yet hardest truths to face. Nothing lasts. Every moment, every breath, every relationship, even every thought passing, shifting, gone as quickly as it comes. To some, this sounds frightening, but to those who learn to see it clearly, it becomes the source of the deepest appreciation for life. When you understand impermanence, known in Buddhism as anicca, the way you see the world changes. You stop treating moments as though they are endless and start treasuring them because they are brief. Think about the last time you heard laughter that warmed your heart. It didn't last forever. It rose, filled the air, and then faded. But wasn't its passing what made it so precious? If it went on forever, you wouldn't notice its sweetness. The truth is, everything gains value because it doesn't last. This teaching is not meant to depress you, but to awaken you. Many people resist change, holding on desperately to what feels good, trying to freeze time. But the harder you grip, the faster it slips away, and the more suffering you create. Gratitude, then, is born when you let go of this clinging. You begin to see that the flower in bloom is beautiful precisely because it will wither, that the meal tastes divine because it will soon be finished, that the people you love are worth cherishing because no moment with them will ever repeat itself exactly. To practice gratitude through impermanence, start by noticing the smallest shifts. The way morning sunlight moves across your wall, changing shade by shade until the room feels different. The warmth of tea in your hands cooling little by little until the cup is empty. The feeling of being tired giving way to sleep, and then the miracle of waking again. These are not ordinary events. They are constant reminders that life is always moving, always flowing, and that the joy of today can never be captured again. Gratitude begins the moment you recognize this flow and stop demanding permanence from what is never meant to stay. This understanding also softens the blow of loss. When something or someone leaves your life, the mind often screams, "It should have lasted forever." But impermanence whispers back, "It was never meant to." And within that whisper lies relief. Instead of resenting that it ended, you can feel thankful that it ever began. Even pain becomes lighter when seen this way. The worst heartbreak, the hardest season, even the sharp edge of grief, all of it will pass. Knowing this doesn't erase the hurt, but it gives you strength to endure it with patience and gratitude for the lessons hidden inside. Impermanence also teaches you presence, because once you see that everything is fleeting, you naturally want to be awake to it while it's here. You stop rushing through your meals, you stop half listening to conversations, you stop waiting for later to finally live. You learn to pay attention, not because you're forcing yourself to, but because you understand that this very moment will vanish. How can you not treasure it? When you eat, the flavors won't return in the exact same way. When you hear the rain tonight, tomorrow it will sound different. Even your own emotions are changing, flowing like waves. Gratitude becomes your natural response because you know you're standing in the middle of miracles that will never come back once gone. Anicca also reveals the hidden beauty in endings. Many people fear endings, but Buddhism teaches that without them, beginnings would never arrive. The setting sun is not just the end of a day, it is the promise of another dawn. The falling leaf is not just decay, it is the nourishment for new growth. When you train yourself to see endings in this way, gratitude blossoms even in moments of goodbye. You thank the experience, the person, the chapter of your life, not for lasting forever, but for touching you at all. This shifts the way you live. You stop demanding certainty and start dancing with change. Gratitude, then, is not something you practice only when life feels kind. It becomes your posture toward reality itself. Every new wrinkle on your skin becomes a reminder that you've lived, that time has gifted you experience. Every farewell sharpens your love for those still by your side. Every changing season brings a lesson. Nothing is guaranteed, and that's what makes it worth celebrating. You also begin to let go of comparison. When you know life is temporary, you stop wasting it chasing other people's timelines or clinging to their approval. You see that your journey is uniquely yours, and the shortness of life makes it foolish to spend it living someone else's script. Gratitude arises as you honor your own unfolding, even if it looks different from what the world expects. Each day becomes enough because you stop measuring it against endless demands for more. And when you connect with this truth deeply, fear starts to fade. Why? Because much of fear is tied to the illusion of permanence. We fear losing what we think should stay forever. We fear endings as if they are unnatural. But when you see impermanence clearly, you realize that change is not an interruption of life, it is life. You can then face uncertainty with a calmer heart, grateful for the chance to experience each stage without expecting it to stay the same. This perspective also changes how you treat people. Knowing nothing lasts, you become kinder. You don't hold grudges as tightly because you know the chance to love someone may be gone tomorrow. You don't postpone forgiveness because you see how fragile time really is. Every word of kindness feels urgent. Every hug feels precious. Gratitude for others doesn't wait for grand occasions. It spills into daily gestures, small moments, simple acts. Even your relationship with your own body transforms. Instead of resenting aging or wishing to be different, you start to appreciate what your body allows you to do right now. Maybe your legs ache, but they still carry you through this day. Maybe your hair has changed, but it carries the years you've survived. Instead of clinging to a past version of yourself, you thank your body for staying with you through every shift, every stage. Living with gratitude for impermanence also strips away boredom. Boredom is the illusion that a moment has no value. But once you see that each moment is passing, boredom cannot exist. Even washing dishes becomes alive when you know this exact arrangement of bubbles, light, and sound will never return. Gratitude wakes you up to the fact that even the simplest action is unrepeatable. Anicca invites you to meet the unknown with open hands. When you accept that tomorrow will not look like today, you stop resisting the flow of life. Instead, you cultivate curiosity. What gift will the next moment bring? This isn't blind optimism. It's the recognition that even in hardship, impermanence guarantees movement. No storm lasts forever. No joy does either, but that only makes each one sacred. Gratitude grows in both directions, thankful that pain will pass, thankful that joy appeared at all. This way of living is not about detachment from life, but deeper connection to it. It's about leaning in fully, aware that each moment is like a wave rising and falling. You stop asking waves to freeze, and you stop being shocked when they disappear. You ride them with presence, you thank them for their rise, and you let them go when they return to the sea. Gratitude becomes the natural rhythm of this ride. The more you live with this awareness, the lighter your heart becomes. You stop filling your life with clutter, both physical and emotional, because you no longer need to cling. You realize that the value of life is not in how much you accumulate, but in how deeply you experience each fleeting moment. Gratitude, then, is not an effort. It is the only response that makes sense when everything is slipping through your fingers. Beautiful because it doesn't stay. As night falls and you rest, this truth becomes even clearer. Today has ended. You cannot hold it, you cannot return to it, and yet you can be grateful it happened at all. Tomorrow will come, or maybe it won't. Either way, this breath, right now, is enough. Gratitude arises in knowing you are alive in this fleeting instant, and that is a miracle beyond measure. When you begin to see impermanence clearly, life starts to feel lighter. Gratitude naturally blooms when you stop clinging to moments and allow them to pass with dignity. Yet, there is another truth waiting just beneath this one, a truth that is far less comfortable but equally transformative. While impermanence shows us the fleeting beauty of life, suffering reveals its hidden depths. Most people spend their lives trying to run away from discomfort, numbing it, hiding it, or pretending it does not exist. But suffering, known in Buddhism as dukkha, is not an enemy. It is a teacher, perhaps the most honest one you will ever meet. And if you let it, it will guide you straight into gratitude so profound that it could not have been found any other way. Suffering is universal. It does not matter how much money you have, how much success you've gained, or how carefully you plan your life. Pain comes to all. A broken heart, an illness, the loss of someone you love, the disappointments that seem to arrive uninvited. Each one of these experiences cuts deep. At first glance, they appear only as burdens, weights dragging you down. Yet, in Buddhist teaching, these are not punishments but opportunities. Without them, you might never awaken to the true richness of being alive. Gratitude does not grow in the shallow soil of constant ease. It takes root in the cracks suffering leaves behind. Dukkha teaches humility. When life is smooth, it is easy to believe you are in control. You make plans, chase goals, and think that effort alone guarantees results. But suffering reminds you that life is unpredictable. A single moment can alter everything. This recognition strips away arrogance and self-importance. You begin to see that you are part of something larger, that you are not the master of the universe, but a participant in its unfolding. From this place of humility, gratitude arises naturally, not as a forced thought, but as a genuine response. You learn to thank even the smallest gifts, knowing how easily they could be lost. Another blessing of suffering is the way it opens your heart to others. When you endure pain, you suddenly understand what it feels like to be vulnerable, to struggle, to cry in silence. This understanding creates empathy. You no longer dismiss another's pain as trivial, because you know how sharp it can be. And from this empathy comes connection. Gratitude deepens when you realize how suffering binds us together, how it allows compassion to bloom. Instead of feeling isolated in your pain, you see that you are part of a shared human story. Gratitude then arises not only for your own resilience, but for the bonds that suffering makes possible. Challenges also reveal hidden strengths. You never truly know how strong you are until life tests you. Adversity forces you to discover resources you didn't know existed: courage, patience, endurance, and wisdom. Think about the times you thought you could not go on, yet you did. Those moments become milestones of gratitude. You look back, not with bitterness, but with awe. I survived that, and I grew. Without hardship, these inner qualities would remain dormant, like seeds never watered. Suffering breaks the ground open so that these seeds can grow. Gratitude arises for the pain itself, because it called forth the best in you. Dukkha also strips away illusions. When everything is comfortable, it's easy to become distracted, chasing possessions, status, or empty pleasures. But when suffering arrives, all those illusions lose their shine. Suddenly, what really matters becomes clear: health, kindness, presence, love. The noise of life falls away, and what remains is truth. And with truth comes gratitude. You thank life for revealing what is real, for cutting through the fog of distraction. You begin to see that suffering, harsh as it is also cleansing, washing away the unnecessary so you can focus on what truly nourishes you. Pain teaches patience in a way comfort never can. When you are forced to wait through long nights of grief or endure slow healing, you learn to soften into time rather than fight it. This patience becomes a source of strength, an inner stability that carries you through all of life's uncertainties. Gratitude grows from recognizing that suffering gave you endurance, the ability to stand steady even when the storm has not yet passed. Without this, every inconvenience would feel unbearable. With it, you carry peace even in the waiting. Another hidden gift of dukkha is the way it teaches you to savor joy more deeply. The taste of sweetness is more intense after bitterness. The warmth of the sun feels more radiant after cold days. In the same way, moments of happiness become sharper, richer, when seen in contrast with suffering. Without sorrow, joy would be taken for granted, dulled by repetition. Gratitude expands because you know what it feels like to be without, and that absence sharpens your appreciation when life offers its blessings again. Suffering also teaches surrender. You cannot control everything. You cannot stop loss or prevent change or dictate every outcome. When you finally accept this, something surprising happens. You relax. Not because the pain is gone, but because you stop fighting reality. Gratitude emerges from this surrender, because in giving up the impossible task of controlling life, you free yourself to see the good that still exists, even in hardship. You stop focusing only on what is broken and start noticing what remains whole. There is another way suffering teaches gratitude. It forces presence. Pain anchors you in the body, in the moment, stripping away the mind's constant wandering. Even though it feels sharp, it demands your full attention, and in that attention, gratitude finds its entry point. You become aware of each breath, each small relief, each kind gesture from another person. Pain narrows your focus, and through that narrowing, you start to see what you had overlooked before. Gratitude does not always enter through joy. Often, it slips in through the cracks pain opens. Dukkha also reveals the impermanence of pain itself. In the midst of suffering, it feels endless, as though it will never ease. But eventually, like all things, it shifts. This realization builds trust in life's cycles. Just as joy does not last forever, neither does sorrow. Gratitude arises from the recognition that even the heaviest burdens are temporary. This gives courage to face future challenges because you know they too will pass. Gratitude is born in this understanding that nothing, not even suffering, has the power to stay forever. Suffering also awakens creativity. When the usual paths fail, when comfort is stripped away, you are forced to find new ways of thinking, new solutions, new expressions. Some of the greatest art, poetry, and wisdom in human history were born from pain. On a personal level, difficulty often unlocks fresh perspectives. Gratitude emerges as you realize suffering did not just take it, also gave, pushing you to grow in ways ease never would. You learn to thank the very challenges that once felt unbearable, because they became gateways to transformation. Dukkha teaches resilience not only in hardship, but also in recovery. When you heal, you look back with a kind of reverence for the process itself. Gratitude swells as you see how far you've come, how wounds turned into scars, how scars became reminders of strength. Every healed wound is a story of survival, a reminder of life's ability to mend itself. Gratitude for healing is perhaps one of the deepest forms, because it acknowledges both the pain and the recovery, both the wound and the wisdom that followed. There is also a profound gratitude that arises for the helpers suffering brings into your life. Pain often draws out the kindness of others, a friend who listens, a stranger who offers support, a family member who stands beside you. These moments of care shine more brightly against the backdrop of suffering. Gratitude grows not just for the relief they provide, but for the reminder that even in darkness, humanity carries light. Suffering reveals generosity, patience, and love in the people around you, and that revelation becomes a source of lifelong thankfulness. Finally, suffering teaches you that gratitude itself is not fragile. It does not depend on perfect conditions. In fact, it thrives in imperfection. Even when life hurts, even when things fall apart, gratitude is still possible. It does not deny pain, but grows alongside it. You learn to say, "This hurts, and I am grateful for what it teaches me." That paradox is the true blessing of dukkha. Gratitude no longer becomes a mood that depends on good days, but a way of seeing that transforms every day, even the hardest ones, into a field of hidden gifts. As you let this truth settle into your heart, you begin to see that suffering is not a curse, but a path. It deepens you, softens you, strengthens you, and connects you. Gratitude is not something you find despite pain, but something you discover because of it, and this discovery changes the way you walk through life. Instead of resisting hardship, you meet it with open eyes, ready to learn, ready to grow, ready to uncover the blessings waiting within. And now, having seen how even suffering can become a source of gratitude, the path opens further. The next step reveals not just your own lessons, but the countless connections that make your very existence possible. Gratitude expands beyond personal experience into the vast web of life that sustains you. Each thread of that web carries you, unseen yet essential, and recognizing it brings a whole new depth to being grateful for today. When suffering is understood as a teacher, gratitude begins to flow even in the darkest valleys of life. You start to see that pain itself can open the heart, making it more tender, more aware, and more alive to the truth that nothing exists on its own. The hardship you endured did not shape you in isolation. Every breath you took while surviving, every word of comfort you received, every resource that allowed you to keep going, all of it came from connections greater than yourself. This is where the teaching of interbeing comes alive, showing that gratitude does not stop with your own resilience, but extends outward into the vast, unseen web that supports you at every moment. Your very existence today is not a single achievement. It is the result of countless beings and causes that converge in this instant. Think of the meal that gave you strength this morning. The food on your plate carries with it the work of farmers who planted seeds, the rain that fell from distant clouds, the soil enriched by generations of decayed leaves, the sun that traveled millions of miles to feed the plants, and the workers who harvested and transported it. When you pause to see this network, gratitude swells. Eating is no longer ordinary. It becomes an act of receiving a universe of care. Even the air in your lungs is a gift of interbeing. Trees, grass, and unseen forests far away release oxygen, without which you could not survive. In turn, your breath nourishes the very plants that sustain you. You are not separate. You are in constant exchange with the world, and gratitude grows when you recognize that every breath you take is shared. Breathing itself becomes a moment of thankfulness for the unseen collaboration of all life. Consider your body, the strength in your muscles, the beating of your heart, the clarity in your eyes. None of these belong only to you. They are the inheritance of countless ancestors who endured, survived, and passed their lives forward. Your DNA is a living record of struggles, victories, and love that shaped you before you even opened your eyes to this world. To live with gratitude for interbeing is to thank those who came before, not in abstract reverence but in real recognition that their lives still pulse within you today. This truth also appears in the simplest tools of daily life. A glass of water is not just water, it is rivers, rainfall, pipes, engineers, and communities that built the systems to carry it to you. A single shirt is not just fabric, it is cotton fields, textile workers, ships that crossed oceans, and hands that stitched. When you see this, gratitude shifts from something occasional to something constant, because you realize that nothing you touch is truly separate from others. Every comfort, every object, every resource is the result of countless invisible contributions. Interbeing also reveals gratitude in the challenges you've faced. When difficulty comes, it is often not only your own strength that carries you, but the presence of others. A doctor's knowledge, a friend's listening ear, the patience of teachers, the support of strangers, all of these weave into the story of how you endure. Gratitude expands as you realize that even in solitude, you have never truly been alone. The network of interbeing is always around you, visible or invisible, holding you up. This awareness softens the illusion of independence. Many people believe they are entirely self-made, that their achievements belong solely to their effort. But when you trace back every step, every success carries with it countless influences. The books you read were written by others. The skills you gained were taught by mentors. The opportunities arose because someone created paths before you. Gratitude flourishes when you see this clearly, not as a diminishment of your effort, but as a celebration of the community of life that made it possible. Nature teaches interbeing constantly. The rain that seems like an inconvenience is the same rain that allows crops to grow. The forest that shades your walk is also a home for countless creatures. The birds whose songs greet you in the morning travel across skies, shaped by winds that touch distant lands. You are not a separate observer of these things. You are woven into their rhythm. Gratitude arises not just for what they give to you, but for the shared existence that makes life possible at all. This way of seeing also reshapes how you handle relationships. Gratitude grows deeper when you understand that every person you meet carries within them a web of stories, experiences, and influences. The kindness of one person is never theirs alone. It is shaped by parents, teachers, communities, and cultures that nurtured them. Even conflicts can reveal interbeing, showing how the behavior of one person is often the echo of countless factors, many unseen. Gratitude blossoms when you see the complexity of others, appreciating the unseen forces that shape each encounter. Your thoughts and emotions also arise through interbeing. The music you hear stirs feelings because of the artists who created it, the traditions that shaped it, the instruments built by skilled hands. A single idea in your mind may have roots in books you read, conversations you had, or the influence of people you will never meet. Gratitude arises when you stop claiming your inner world as only yours and recognize the endless threads that weave into your consciousness. Technology is another reminder of this web. The phone in your pocket is not a single object, but a global effort of miners, designers, engineers, and workers across continents. The electricity that charges it comes from power plants, rivers, fuels, or windmills, all connected. Even your ability to read these words is part of interbeing, a language shaped over centuries, literacy taught by others, devices created by countless minds. Gratitude becomes overwhelming when you see how many lives converge in something as simple as turning on a screen. Interbeing also teaches you to value what seems small. A bee pollinating a flower far away may contribute to the fruit you eat months later. An unseen worker repairing roads makes it possible for you to travel safely. A stranger donating blood may one day save the life of someone you love. Gratitude expands as you recognize that your well-being rests on countless acts of service you may never witness, offered by people and beings who do not even know your name. Seeing this web clearly also reduces loneliness. When you feel disconnected, remembering interbeing reveals that you are never truly separate. The warmth of the sun touches your skin, the ground holds you steady, the food you eat carries the care of farmers you will never meet. Gratitude arises from realizing that isolation is only an illusion. In reality, you are in constant relationship with the entire world. This awareness also inspires responsibility. When you see how deeply connected everything is, gratitude compels you to care for what sustains you. You begin to thank the earth, not only in words but in action, choosing to live with less waste, to protect water and soil, to honor the cycles that make your life possible. Gratitude is no longer passive. It becomes active stewardship, a way of giving back to the web that has given you everything. Gratitude through interbeing also reshapes time. The present moment is not isolated. It carries within it the past and the future. Every step you take is shaped by history, and every choice you make influences what is to come. You are both the result of countless causes and a cause yourself, creating ripples that extend outward. Gratitude grows when you honor this position, thankful for the inheritance you've received and mindful of the legacy you are creating. Even suffering gains new meaning when seen through interbeing. The hardships you endure may one day strengthen someone else, your story becoming a source of guidance. Gratitude then arises not only for what you receive, but for the chance to contribute to the web. Your pain, transformed into wisdom, becomes part of the support others will rely on. Interbeing reveals that gratitude is not only about what flows to you, but also about what flows through you to others. Everywhere you look, the teaching of interbeing points back to the same truth. Nothing exists alone. The leaf is not separate from the tree is not separate from the soil is not separate from the rain. You are not separate from any of it. Gratitude becomes not a practice you must remember, but a natural response to seeing reality clearly. When you see the web of life, you cannot help but give thanks, because you recognize that everything around you is already giving itself to you. As this awareness deepens, life transforms. Meals become sacred, breaths become blessings, relationships become mirrors of countless lives intertwined. Gratitude is no longer reserved for rare moments of joy. It becomes the way you meet every moment, because every moment is supported by an infinity of causes. To thank the unseen web of life is to thank life itself, again and again, until thankfulness becomes indistinguishable from the way you live. When you begin to see interbeing clearly, gratitude ceases to be an abstract thought and becomes a living awareness. You notice that the air you breathe, the clothes you wear, the ground that carries you, and even the challenges you face are all part of a web so vast that it humbles the mind. But there is one place where this truth becomes most immediate, where the unseen network of life enters your body and sustains you in the most intimate way. Every meal you take is not just food, it is the story of the universe arriving on your plate. To eat without awareness is to miss this miracle. To eat with mindfulness is to turn every bite into gratitude itself. Food is more than fuel. It carries the sun, the rain, the earth, and the labor of countless hands. When you pause before a meal, you touch this reality. You see the grain that once swayed in fields, the vegetables nourished by soil alive with microbes, the water that has traveled through rivers and clouds, the work of farmers who rose before dawn, and the people who transported, prepared, and cooked. In this moment, gratitude deepens because you realize you are not eating a simple dish, you are receiving a gift of interdependence. Mindful eating begins with slowing down. In a world that glorifies speed, meals are often rushed, taken while scrolling on screens, or consumed in silence without thought. Yet when you choose to eat slowly, the act transforms. You begin to taste the layers of flavor, notice the textures, feel the warmth of soup or the crispness of fruit. Gratitude grows, not because the food is extraordinary, but because your attention is. The ordinary becomes sacred when you stop to notice it fully. Awareness at the table also teaches respect. When you truly see the effort behind your meal, waste becomes unthinkable. A discarded grain of rice is not just a grain, it is the sweat of a farmer, the generosity of the earth, and the energy of the sun. Gratitude teaches you to honor food by taking only what you need and receiving it with reverence. This respect extends beyond the meal into your whole way of living, shaping a deeper care for resources, for nature, and for all beings who make life possible. Mindful eating also reconnects you to your body. Often people eat while distracted, numbing emotions or filling emptiness without listening to the body's signals. But when you eat with awareness, you notice hunger as it rises, fullness as it arrives, and satisfaction when the body feels nourished. Gratitude flows when you realize your body communicates so clearly, asking only for balance. You begin to thank your body for guiding you, for digesting, for turning food into energy, for sustaining your life without needing your command. The practice also reveals how deeply emotions are tied to food. A bite of a family recipe may awaken memories of childhood, a scent may recall loved ones, and a simple cup of tea may soothe after a difficult day. Food becomes more than taste. It becomes a connection to time, to people, to experiences. Gratitude grows as you recognize these emotional threads, thanking not just the flavor but the memories, not just the nourishment but the love carried through meals. Eating with mindfulness also reshapes relationships. When you share a meal, you are not just sharing food, you are sharing gratitude. Conversations at the table become deeper when you are fully present, listening with the same attention you give to your food. Gratitude here is not silent. It is expressed through appreciation of company, through recognition of the effort someone put into cooking, through the joy of togetherness. Meals become ceremonies of connection, each bite binding people closer through shared presence. Gratitude through eating also awakens compassion. Many meals come through the labor of people who are unseen and often underappreciated. To eat mindfully is to remember the worker bent in the fields, the driver on the road, the cook in the kitchen. This awareness can inspire a desire to honor their effort, not only with words, but with choices, supporting fair trade, reducing waste, giving thanks for their unseen hands. Gratitude then becomes a bridge between you and those who made your nourishment possible, even if you never meet them. Food also reflects the seasons. A ripe fruit in summer, a warm stew in winter, fresh greens in spring, all carry the rhythm of the earth. When you eat in awareness, you taste not only the food, but the time of year, the cycles of nature that provide abundance. Gratitude here expands into a sense of belonging. You are part of the seasons, moving with them, receiving their gifts. Each meal becomes a reminder of the earth's generosity, a chance to align yourself with its natural flow. Mindful eating brings clarity about consumption itself. You start to see that food is not endless, that its abundance is fragile, dependent on balance in ecosystems and fairness in distribution. Gratitude then becomes inseparable from responsibility. You cannot be truly grateful while also careless, and so gratitude invites mindful choices, eating less meat to ease strain on the earth, choosing local foods to honor the land around you, or simply valuing what you already have instead of demanding more. The act of chewing becomes meditation. Each bite is an opportunity to slow the racing mind, to anchor yourself in presence. You feel the texture, the transformation from solid to nourishment, the simple act of swallowing. Gratitude for food merges with gratitude for the stillness it offers, the way it grounds you in now. Meals cease to be interruptions in the day, they become pauses of clarity, like bells calling you back to awareness. Gratitude also arises from realizing that food carries stories beyond your own. A spice from a distant country holds centuries of trade and tradition. A grain cultivated over generations reflects the perseverance of farmers who adapted to changing climates. Every meal is history served on a plate, culture and heritage woven into flavors. To eat mindfully is to honor these stories, to thank not only the food, but the countless lives and centuries that shaped it. There is also the gift of healing. Food restores energy after exhaustion, soothes the body when sick, and can even comfort the spirit in sorrow. When you pay attention, you see that nourishment is not mechanical, it is deeply caring. A bowl of soup when unwell, a cup of tea after grief, or bread shared in community, these are acts of healing made visible. Gratitude expands when you recognize that food has always been medicine, always been a source of renewal offered by life itself. In this practice, even silence is transformed. Eating without words, without distractions, allows you to meet your food directly. Each moment becomes full, complete, unbroken by noise. Gratitude deepens in this silence because you hear the food with your senses. You hear the crunch, the sip, the rhythm of chewing. Silence becomes a teacher, reminding you that gratitude does not need elaborate rituals. It arises when you meet life as it is. Mindful eating also reveals impermanence in a new way. Each bite disappears as it nourishes you. Each flavor fades. Each plate empties. Far from being sad, this impermanence makes the meal precious. Gratitude is heightened because you know it will not last. The sweetness of fruit, the warmth of bread, the aroma of spices all vanish, leaving only the memory and the energy they give. To thank them in their passing is to thank life itself for its constant giving. Eating mindfully even changes how you view hunger. Instead of treating it as discomfort to be silenced, you begin to see hunger as the body's way of reminding you of your dependence on life. Gratitude grows for the hunger itself, because it shows you what sustains you. It keeps you connected to the rhythm of needing and receiving. When food arrives to meet hunger, the gratitude doubles, thankful for both the reminder and the fulfillment. This practice also touches the heart with simplicity. A humble meal, when eaten mindfully, can bring more gratitude than a feast consumed in distraction. It is not the richness of the food, but the richness of attention that awakens thankfulness. A simple bowl of rice, a slice of bread, a piece of fruit when seen fully, these become treasures. Gratitude teaches you that enough is not a matter of quantity, but of awareness. Through mindful eating, gratitude is no longer confined to special moments. It becomes daily, ordinary, woven into the rhythm of life. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner are transformed into reminders of connection, generosity, and care. Gratitude becomes as regular as breathing, each meal a chance to remember that you are held by a world that continually gives itself to you. And from here, the path of gratitude widens even further. Once you learn to find thankfulness in food, in breath, in every ordinary moment, you discover that joy does not come from adding more, but from seeing more clearly what is already here. The next step reveals how the simplicity of life itself, lived without excess, holds a secret abundance waiting to be uncovered. When every meal is met with gratitude, life itself starts to slow down. Food no longer feels rushed or unnoticed. It becomes a reminder that the smallest details carry the greatest depth. From this awareness, it becomes clear that joy is not found in what is added, but in what is stripped away. The heart begins to crave simplicity, a rhythm of living that allows space for gratitude to breathe. This is where Buddhist monastic life offers a profound lesson. Far from being austere deprivation, its simplicity reveals an abundance most of the world overlooks. In the quiet order of monastic rhythms lies a joy so deep that it transforms how you see everything you already have. Monastic life is built on patterns of mindfulness, rising early with the sun, moving through the day with deliberate steps, balancing work, rest, and meditation. All of this cultivates stability. Gratitude arises not from novelty, but from constancy. The repeated actions, done with full attention, turn ordinary moments into treasures. Washing a bowl, sweeping a floor, chanting a verse, each act is both practical and sacred. In this rhythm, life stops feeling scattered and begins to feel whole. Gratitude flows naturally because you finally see that every small act is already enough. Simplicity also reveals freedom. In a world drowning in choices and possessions, simplicity cuts through the noise. A monk does not need a closet full of clothes or a shelf of decorations to feel complete. One robe, one bowl, one mat. These are not symbols of lack, but of liberation. Gratitude grows when you no longer chase endless options, when your heart learns to rest in sufficiency. With fewer distractions, the richness of what remains shines brighter. A single cup of tea becomes an occasion. A shared silence becomes nourishment. Joy comes not from more but from less, and gratitude becomes the natural state of being. This simplicity also reshapes time. In modern life, time feels rushed, fragmented, consumed by endless obligations. But in monastic rhythms, time is marked by bells, chanting, and mindful pauses. These reminders call you back, again and again, to the present. Gratitude expands as you see that you do not need more hours in the day. You need more presence within the hours you already have. The joy of monastic life is not that it stretches time, but that it deepens it. Every moment is full because it is met fully. The discipline of simplicity also teaches gratitude for the basics. When you live with little, you begin to notice how much you already have. A roof over your head, a bed to rest in, water to drink, these no longer seem small. They become gifts. The abundance that consumer culture promises is revealed as an illusion because joy does not multiply with possessions. Gratitude deepens when you see that your well-being depends less on accumulation and more on awareness. By stripping life down to essentials, simplicity uncovers the quiet wealth that was always there. Simplicity also cultivates gratitude through community. In monasteries, meals are shared, work is divided, silence is observed together. This interdependence strengthens bonds and reduces the illusion of separateness. Gratitude arises not only for what you receive, but for the chance to contribute, for the harmony of living in rhythm with others. Modern life often isolates, but monastic life weaves together, reminding you that abundance is not measured in possessions, but in connections. The joy of being part of something larger replaces the loneliness of constant striving. Another gift of monastic simplicity is the way it shifts desire. In ordinary life, desire constantly grows new goals, new cravings, new demands. But when you live simply, desire quiets. Gratitude expands because the constant comparison, the need to compete or prove, begins to fade. With fewer wants, the heart rests more easily. Joy arises from what is already present, rather than from what is still missing. This inner sufficiency is the greatest wealth simplicity can offer. Work itself becomes an expression of gratitude. In monasteries, tasks are done not for profit, but for care. Care of the space, care of the body, care of the community. Sweeping a courtyard is not just cleaning, it is cultivating clarity of mind. Cooking is not just preparing food, it is offering nourishment. Gratitude grows when you begin to see your own daily tasks in this light. Folding laundry, washing dishes, tending to your home, all can be acts of reverence when done without hurry, without resentment, with attention to the life they sustain. Simplicity also deepens the appreciation of silence. In the modern world, noise is constant: screens, conversations, advertisements, background sounds. Silence is rare and often avoided. But in monastic life, silence is cherished, woven into the day as a practice of awareness. Gratitude swells when you finally hear the silence that has always been present beneath the noise. In silence, the mind rests, the heart softens, and joy becomes easier to touch. Silence is not emptiness but fullness, reminding you that peace does not need to be created. It is already there, waiting to be noticed. The simplicity of monastic rhythms also nurtures gratitude for the body. Rising early, eating mindfully, walking slowly, meditating, all of these honor the body's natural rhythms. There is no rush to exhaust or exploit it. Gratitude grows when you see how your body responds to this care: more energy, more clarity, more peace. You begin to thank your body not only for carrying you through hardship, but for being the very ground of your practice. Monastic life reminds you that caring for the body is not indulgence but reverence, a way of honoring the gift of being alive. Simplicity teaches gratitude for nature in profound ways. Without the distractions of excess, the natural world becomes vivid. The sound of rain, the warmth of sunlight, the sight of a tree swaying in the wind, these are no longer background noise but central experiences. Gratitude swells as you reconnect to rhythms older and wiser than your own, realizing that joy does not need entertainment when the world itself is already full of wonder. Monastic simplicity is not escape from life. It is deeper immersion into its raw beauty. Living with little also teaches adaptability. When you rely less on external conditions for happiness, you become more resilient. Gratitude arises from realizing how little you truly need to be well. A simple meal can sustain you. A quiet space can bring peace. A single robe can clothe you. This resilience transforms the way you meet change, because you are no longer dependent on fragile comforts. Joy comes from within, and gratitude flows because you have discovered freedom from constant craving. The rhythm of monastic life also sharpens awareness of interdependence. With fewer distractions, you begin to see more clearly how every aspect of life connects. Gratitude arises when you notice how much care is required to sustain even a simple life. The effort of planting, cleaning, cooking, maintaining, nothing is separate, and everything matters. This awareness makes gratitude continuous, because each act reveals the threads of connection that support you. Simplicity further reveals abundance through repetition. When tasks and rituals are repeated daily, they stop being mundane and start being profound. Chanting the same verses, sweeping the same floor, eating the same food, each repetition becomes a deepening rather than a dulling. Gratitude arises from seeing that newness is not always about novelty, but about awareness. The same act, done with presence, reveals infinite depth. Joy is found not in variety, but in attention. The practice of simplicity also reveals how much suffering is created by excess. Too many choices, too many possessions, too many distractions. These overwhelm rather than satisfy. Gratitude expands when you release them and discover how much lighter life feels. The joy of simplicity is not about deprivation, but about clarity. You see more clearly, feel more deeply, live more freely. Gratitude becomes your natural state because you are no longer burdened by what is unnecessary. Monastic rhythms also highlight the power of consistency. Gratitude is not found in grand gestures, but in steady practice. Daily meditation, mindful work, simple meals, each builds a foundation of stability. This constancy teaches you that joy is not a sudden gift, but a steady cultivation. Gratitude arises because you see how these small, repeated actions create a life that feels full, grounded, and peaceful. The joy of simplicity also reveals itself in contentment. When you stop searching endlessly for the next thing, you begin to rest in what is here. Contentment is not resignation, but appreciation. It is the quiet joy of realizing you have enough right now. Gratitude grows in this realization because you are no longer trapped in longing. You see that life already holds abundance, and that abundance is revealed only when desire becomes quiet. Through simple monastic rhythms, gratitude becomes inseparable from daily life. Every bell, every breath, every step becomes a reminder. Joy arises not from adding more, but from stripping away what hides the truth. Gratitude, then, is not occasional but constant, not dependent but steady. The abundance revealed by simplicity is not hidden in distant places. It is here, in the life you already live, waiting for you to notice. And from here, the journey continues. Once you taste the joy of simplicity, you begin to see gratitude, even in the most basic miracle of life, the breath itself. Each inhale becomes a gift, each exhale a release, and the rhythm of breathing becomes the first and most enduring teacher of gratitude. Simplicity in monastic rhythms uncovers a hidden wealth in what already surrounds you. Joy emerges not from adding but from noticing. not from owning but from being present. And yet, beneath even the rhythm of daily life lies something more fundamental, something so constant it is often overlooked. Before food, before shelter, before speech, there is breath. Without it, nothing continues. With it, everything is possible. Breath is the first and most intimate teacher of gratitude, always available, always giving, always reminding you of life's fragility and abundance in the same moment. Breathing is often dismissed as automatic, a background function of the body. But when awareness turns toward it, the ordinary reveals its extraordinary depth. Each inhale is a miracle. The body receives air without demand. Oxygen flows into the blood. Life is renewed again and again. Each exhale is an act of letting go, a release of what the body no longer needs, a surrender to impermanence. Gratitude grows when you begin to see this cycle not as mechanical, but as the very pulse of life. The inhale itself teaches reception. With no effort beyond allowing, life enters. Air flows freely into the lungs, offering energy and clarity. Gratitude arises for the invisible generosity of the earth, for trees, oceans, and the balance of ecosystems that make breathing possible. In this simple act, you are reminded that you are constantly being sustained by forces outside your control. Every inhale is a reminder that you are supported, that life is being gifted to you one breath at a time. The exhale teaches release. Just as life gives, it also takes away. Exhaling is not loss but renewal. The body lets go of carbon dioxide, making room for the next inhale. Gratitude emerges when you realize that letting go is not an end, but a necessity for continuation. Each exhale becomes a lesson in trust. Trust that more will come. Trust that space must be cleared for life to continue. Trust that clinging to what has already served its purpose only creates stagnation. Breath also teaches impermanence with clarity sharper than words. No breath lasts forever. The inhale cannot be held endlessly. The exhale cannot be resisted indefinitely. Gratitude deepens as you see that life itself is a series of arrivals and departures. To resist this rhythm is to suffer. To accept it is to find peace. By observing the breath, you learn to flow with change, to honor each moment as passing yet precious. Attention to breath grounds you in the present. While the mind races through past regrets or future worries, the breath anchors you in now. Each inhale says, here. Each exhale says, now. Gratitude grows when you realize that presence is not something you must chase, but something that has always been waiting in your breath. This presence becomes medicine for restlessness, a balm for anxiety, a reminder that peace is available in the simplest of acts. Breath also reveals the interconnection between body and mind. Shallow breathing accompanies tension, while deep breathing nurtures calm. Gratitude expands when you see that you carry within you the ability to soothe your own being, not through external control, but through gentle awareness. The body, when given care, responds with ease. Gratitude becomes not only for the breath itself, but for the body's wisdom, for its ability to guide you back to balance through something as simple as inhaling and exhaling. The rhythm of breath is also a teacher of patience. Breathing cannot be rushed. No matter how fast you live, the breath remains steady, moving at its own pace. Gratitude deepens when you align with this rhythm, learning to slow down, to respect the body's tempo, to see that life does not require constant speed. Patience grows naturally when you follow the breath, and with it comes thankfulness for the calm that patience brings. Breathing highlights dependence on the natural world. Without trees, without oceans, without the delicate balance of ecosystems, there would be no oxygen to inhale. Gratitude arises when you see that every breath ties you to forests, rivers, winds, and unseen cycles that sustain you. To breathe is to be in constant relationship with the planet. Each inhale is a gift from the earth. Each exhale is a return. Gratitude expands beyond the self into reverence for the world that makes your breathing possible. The fragility of breath reveals life's preciousness. Missing even a few breaths brings urgency, fear, and the recognition of how thin the line is between life and death. Gratitude blooms when you realize how often you take this fragility for granted. Each breath is survival renewed. Each breath is proof that you are alive now, even if the future is uncertain. Gratitude becomes sharper, more immediate, when you remember how easily the breath could be lost. Breath also reflects emotion. In moments of anger, the breath grows hot and quick. In sadness, it becomes heavy and slow. In joy, it feels light and flowing. Gratitude arises when you notice this mirror, when you see that the breath gives you insight into your inner world without judgment. It shows you your state of being honestly, offering a chance to soften, to calm, to release. The breath becomes a teacher of self-understanding, and gratitude follows this self-knowledge. The cycle of breathing also teaches balance. Inhale and exhale, receiving and releasing, filling and emptying, neither can dominate. Gratitude emerges when you see that life thrives not in extremes, but in rhythm. Breath shows you that balance is not static but dynamic, a constant movement between opposites. Gratitude for this balance deepens as you learn to apply it beyond the body into relationships, choices, and the flow of life itself. Breathing is also communal. When you breathe, you share the same air with all beings. The exhale of one becomes the inhale of another. Gratitude arises when you recognize that you are always in exchange with others, human and non-human, near and far. You are never truly separate. Each breath is a bond, invisible but real, connecting you to the world. Gratitude then becomes not only personal but collective, honoring the shared breath of all life. Awareness of breath can also transform suffering. In moments of pain or fear, focusing on the breath steadies the mind. Even when the body struggles, the breath offers grounding, a way to remain present with what is difficult without being overwhelmed. Gratitude grows from the recognition that breath is always available as a refuge, a constant companion that supports you in silence. Breath reveals generosity. No one owns the air. It is given freely, without discrimination, sustaining every being equally. Gratitude arises when you reflect on this, recognizing that life itself is built on generosity far greater than human control. The breath is a daily reminder that abundance is not found in ownership, but in sharing. Gratitude deepens when you embody this truth, choosing to live generously in return. The practice of observing breath also teaches discipline. Returning again and again to the inhale and exhale strengthens attention. The mind wanders, but the breath is always there, waiting. Gratitude grows when you see that you need not chase stability in distant places. It is already available in the breath that rises and falls within you. Discipline born of breath is not harsh but gentle, a practice of returning, of beginning again, endlessly supported by life itself. Every breath also carries memory. The air you breathe today has cycled through forests, oceans, mountains, and the bodies of countless beings before you. To inhale is to touch history, to participate in a flow that stretches back beyond your lifetime. Gratitude arises when you realize that breath is a link between past and present, a continuity of life that connects you to ancestors, to earth, to the unfolding of existence itself. Breath is also a reminder of equality. Regardless of wealth, status, or belief, every person breathes. Gratitude deepens when you see this commonality, when you recognize that beneath differences, the breath unites all beings. The same rhythm sustains everyone. Gratitude then becomes not only appreciation for your own breath, but reverence for the shared life that binds humanity together. In the stillness of night, when distractions fade, the breath becomes even more vivid. Each rise and fall of the chest is a lullaby of presence, a rhythm that carries you into rest. Gratitude grows in the quiet, when you notice how the breath does not demand your awareness, but offers its gift anyway. To thank the breath is to thank life itself, again and again, with every inhale and exhale. When you come to see breath as the first teacher of gratitude, you realize that gratitude does not require external events, possessions, or achievements. It is already woven into the act of being alive. Every inhale is a gift you did not earn. Every exhale is a release you cannot avoid. To live with this awareness is to live in constant thankfulness, carried by the breath that sustains you, moment after moment, until your final one. And from this most intimate teacher, the path continues outward. Once you learn gratitude in the breath, you begin to see it even in what seems empty. Silence, space, and absence reveal their own gifts, and gratitude expands to embrace not only what fills life, but also what opens it. The next lesson lies in the quiet expanses that allow life to exist at all. Breath shows you that gratitude is woven into every moment, as each inhale gives life and each exhale teaches release. Yet, behind breath itself lies something even more subtle, something that is easy to overlook precisely because it appears empty. Between the inhale and the exhale, there is space. Around every object, there is openness. Within every pause, there is silence. At first glance, emptiness feels like nothing, but in truth, it is the foundation of everything. In Buddhist teaching, this is called shunyata, the emptiness that is not void but potential, the silent teacher that reveals abundance in absence. Gratitude deepens when you realize that without space, nothing could exist at all. Space gives form its meaning. A cup holds water not because of its solid walls, but because of the emptiness inside. A house shelters not because of its bricks, but because of the space they enclose. Even words carry meaning only because of the silence between sounds. Gratitude arises when you see that emptiness is not lack, but the condition for usefulness. To appreciate space is to see that what often feels invisible is the very thing that allows life to function. Emptiness also teaches humility. The self you cling to so tightly is not a solid, unchanging entity. It is made of countless conditions, body, thoughts, feelings, history, all shifting, all interdependent. Gratitude grows when you see that the fixed identity you once believed in is itself empty of permanence. This emptiness does not erase you, it frees you. It allows you to be flexible, open, alive. Gratitude emerges as you realize that emptiness makes growth possible because nothing is locked in stone. Silence, too, is a form of emptiness that teaches. Without silence, music would be noise, speech would be chaos, thought would have no clarity. The pauses are what shape the sounds. Gratitude arises when you begin to thank silence, not only as absence, but as presence, the fertile ground on which communication rests. In silence, you meet yourself. In silence, you listen deeply. In silence, you uncover wisdom that words cannot reach. Space is also what allows relationship. Between two people, there must be space, the room to breathe, to be, to grow. Too much grasping suffocates, too much control stifles. Gratitude grows when you honor the space in relationships as a gift, a reminder that love flourishes not by erasing difference, but by allowing openness. Gratitude is not only for closeness but also for distance, for the emptiness that lets connection breathe. Emptiness also reveals possibility. A blank page is empty, yet it holds infinite stories. An empty room may feel bare, yet it is full of potential gatherings, conversations, and lives. Gratitude emerges when you stop fearing emptiness as absence and start seeing it as promise. Shunyata teaches that nothingness is not deadness, but potentiality, the field from which everything arises. Thankfulness deepens when you honor emptiness as the silent womb of creation. The teaching of emptiness also frees you from attachment. When you recognize that all things are empty of fixed essence, you stop clinging so tightly. Gratitude grows as you see that even the hardest moments carry emptiness, meaning they too can change, dissolve, and give birth to something new. Emptiness makes transformation possible. Gratitude arises not only for the forms that appear, but for the openness that ensures they can never trap you forever. Space in your life is also a teacher. In a world obsessed with filling every moment, emptiness feels uncomfortable. But when you allow gaps, unstructured time, uncluttered rooms, pauses in conversation, you find rest. Gratitude expands when you see that emptiness restores, emptiness heals, emptiness invites creativity. Without space, life suffocates. With space, joy has room to unfold. Shunyata also teaches equality. Because nothing has an independent, permanent essence, all things are interdependent and of equal value. Gratitude grows when you see that no being is separate, no one superior, no thing self-existing. Emptiness levels, arrogance, reminding you that everything arises together, supported by everything else. Gratitude becomes reverence for this shared emptiness, for the truth that life belongs to no one and yet includes everyone. Space allows awareness to arise. In meditation, when you quiet thoughts, you encounter the vast openness of mind. At first it may feel empty, but soon you realize this emptiness is freedom, it is clarity, it is peace. Gratitude arises for this inner space, the quiet within that makes it possible to see without distortion. Without emptiness, the mind would be crowded with endless chatter. With emptiness, it becomes clear as a sky after storm. Even suffering, when seen through the lens of emptiness, carries hidden relief. Pain feels solid, unchangeable, overwhelming, but emptiness reveals that pain too is constructed, arising from conditions, lacking permanence. Gratitude emerges when you realize that no suffering is absolute, that within its very structure lies the potential to dissolve. Emptiness softens despair, turning even hardship into a doorway for transformation. Gratitude also arises for the way emptiness shapes beauty. The sky is beautiful because it is vast and open. A garden is peaceful because of the spaces between trees, the quiet between blooms. A painting breathes because of the empty spaces between strokes. Gratitude for emptiness awakens a new way of seeing, where absence itself becomes presence, where gaps reveal meaning rather than deny it. Space also teaches generosity. A crowded mind clings, a crowded life hoards. But when you create emptiness by letting go of possessions, by clearing schedules, by releasing grudges, you make room for others. Gratitude expands when you see that emptiness is not selfishness but offering. To give space is to give freedom. To embrace emptiness is to allow others to grow. Gratitude flows when you live lightly, leaving space for the world to breathe. Emptiness reveals impermanence in its purest form. Forms arise and pass away, leaving space behind. That space is constant, untouched, waiting for the next arising. Gratitude arises when you realize that while all forms shift, the openness remains. There is comfort in this constancy, in knowing that space itself cannot be destroyed. Gratitude deepens as you rest in this truth, finding stability not in forms, but in the emptiness that holds them all. Shunyata also teaches interconnectedness in a profound way. Because everything is empty of self, everything exists only through relation. A flower is empty of independent being, but full of soil, rain, sunlight, time, and care. Gratitude emerges when you see that emptiness does not mean nothingness. It means fullness of connection. Every empty thing is a doorway to interbeing. Gratitude grows as you recognize that emptiness itself ties all life together. When you meet emptiness directly, fear dissolves. Much of fear arises from the clinging to self, to permanence, to certainty. Emptiness reveals there is nothing fixed to lose. Gratitude arises when you understand this, because it means you are free to live without fear of what will end. Emptiness becomes liberation, a teacher that shows you how to live lightly, gratefully, without chains. In daily life, gratitude for space appears in the simplest ways: the pause between tasks, the breath between words, the silence of a morning before the world wakes. These are not wasted, they are gifts. Gratitude deepens when you stop filling them with noise and start honoring them as moments of renewal. Emptiness gives rhythm to life, making activity meaningful, making rest restorative. Even death can be seen through this lens. The body dissolves, the self returns to emptiness. But emptiness is not destruction, it is return to possibility. Gratitude arises for this mystery, for the reminder that endings are not final, but transformations. To thank emptiness is to thank the groundless ground from which all life springs and to which it returns. The silent teacher of emptiness shows you that life is not defined by what is present alone, but also by what is absent, by the spaces that hold form. Gratitude deepens when you honor both the fullness of form and the openness of space. When you live this way, every silence becomes music, every emptiness becomes abundance, every absence becomes a reminder of possibility, and so the path continues. Once you learn to bow to emptiness as a teacher, you begin to see that even karma, the unfolding of causes and effects, pleasant or difficult, becomes an opportunity for gratitude. Not only the easy conditions, but even the painful ones carry lessons, shaping wisdom and guiding you deeper into the truth of life. Emptiness reveals itself as the quiet teacher that makes everything possible, showing that what appears absent is often the source of deepest abundance. Yet, life is not only formed by openness and space, it is also shaped by the threads of cause and effect, the invisible patterns we call karma. Every thought, word, and action leaves traces, and those traces return in ways both gentle and difficult. While it is easy to be grateful for pleasant karma, the challenge is to meet the painful consequences with the same openness of heart. To see karma not as punishment, but as guidance, is to unlock a deeper form of gratitude, one that welcomes even hardship as an opportunity for wisdom. Karma is often misunderstood as fate, as if life is rigidly predetermined by past actions. In truth, karma is a dynamic law of cause and effect, constantly shaping and reshaping experience. Gratitude arises when you realize that karma is not about judgment, but about learning. Every difficulty carries within it a lesson, every setback a message, every disappointment a doorway to growth. Gratitude begins when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What can this teach me?" When painful karma appears, it strips away illusions of control. Plans collapse, relationships end, health falters. In those moments, the ego resists, demanding fairness. But gratitude grows when you begin to see that these experiences force you to cultivate resilience, patience, and humility. They reveal how little you truly control and how much you still have to learn. Gratitude arises not for the suffering itself, but for the wisdom it calls forth. Difficult karma also exposes the patterns you carry. Perhaps it shows you anger that repeats, attachments that cling, or fears that dictate choices. Without challenges, these patterns might remain hidden, quietly shaping your life. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that painful karma acts as a mirror, reflecting back the habits that need attention. Without this reflection, growth would stagnate. Thankfulness comes when you realize that the discomfort is pointing directly to the places where freedom is possible. Another blessing of karma is its reminder of responsibility. Every action matters. Harsh words ripple outward. Kindness does too. Gratitude grows when you see that you are not powerless but continually creating conditions for your future. Even when past actions bring hardship, you can plant new seeds through mindfulness and compassion. Gratitude arises from this empowerment, from knowing that today's choices can soften tomorrow's difficulties. Karma also teaches forgiveness. Often, the hardest lessons come not from strangers, but from those closest to you. Betrayal, conflict, and misunderstanding all sting deeply. Gratitude begins when you see these experiences as part of karmic unfolding, not as random cruelty. When you recognize that others, too, are shaped by their own causes and conditions, forgiveness becomes possible. Gratitude emerges as you release resentment, realizing that even the painful encounter gave you insight into patience, compassion, and the shared struggles of being human. Difficult karma also refines compassion for others. When you experience loss, you understand grief more deeply. When you face illness, you feel tenderness for those suffering the same. Gratitude arises when you realize that your pain connects you to others, making your heart more spacious, more tender. Karma, in this way, turns personal hardship into a bridge of empathy, and gratitude flows for the deeper bonds it creates. There is also a lesson in impermanence within karmic unfolding. No result, however painful, lasts forever. A period of suffering will shift, just as joy does. Gratitude emerges when you remember that karma is fluid, not fixed. Each moment carries the possibility of change, of renewal, of transformation. Even the hardest lessons lose their sharpness with time, leaving behind wisdom in place of pain. Gratitude for karma also grows when you see how it weaves your life into a tapestry larger than yourself. What you experience is not isolated. It is tied to countless interactions across time. Someone else's generosity may have set the stage for your success, just as your past actions ripple into the lives of others. Gratitude deepens when you see karma as interbeing in motion, a reminder that your life is part of a web of countless influences. Karma also teaches surrender. Often, you cannot undo what has been done. You can only meet its results with presence. Gratitude grows when you accept this without bitterness, when you stop resisting what is already here. In surrender, you discover peace not by controlling outcomes, but by aligning with reality. Gratitude arises for this shift in perspective, because it frees you from the exhausting struggle of demanding that life unfold differently than it does. Another gift of karma is the way it teaches discernment. Through experience, you learn which actions lead to suffering and which lead to peace. Gratitude deepens when you realize that even painful consequences sharpen your wisdom, making you more skillful in choices ahead. Karma becomes not a burden, but a teacher, guiding you to live with greater awareness. Even joy carries karmic lessons. Gratitude expands when you realize that moments of ease and success are not random, but the ripening of seeds you once planted. Instead of taking them for granted, you begin to honor them, seeing them as reminders that your actions matter. Gratitude arises both for the sweetness of joy and for the path that created it, reminding you to keep planting seeds of kindness, patience, and generosity. Karma also teaches equanimity. Life brings both pleasant and unpleasant results, and gratitude grows when you stop clinging to one while rejecting the other. By meeting both with balance, you discover peace that is not dependent on constant pleasure. Gratitude emerges for the wisdom that karma offers, teaching you to embrace life's full spectrum without being trapped by it. Through karmic lessons, you also learn humility. When hardships come, you realize you are not exempt from life's laws. Gratitude arises for this humbling because it softens pride and deepens compassion. Humility makes you more open to learning, more receptive to truth, and more connected to others. Karma's difficult lessons often carry this gift, and gratitude grows when you see the value in being humbled. Gratitude for karma deepens when you realize that it shapes your path of practice. Without difficulty, there would be no reason to turn inward, no push to seek wisdom. Many turn to spiritual practice, not because life is easy, but because karma presents pain that cannot be ignored. Gratitude arises for these turning points, even when they come wrapped in hardship, because they awaken the search for truth and freedom. Karmic lessons also invite you to cultivate patience with life itself. Results often ripen slowly, not in the timeline you desire. Gratitude grows when you learn to trust this unfolding, to accept that seeds may take years to bear fruit. Patience becomes gratitude in action, a recognition that life's timing is its own, and that wisdom often emerges only when conditions are fully ready. In reframing karma as teacher, gratitude becomes more stable. It no longer depends on only receiving what you like. It becomes resilient, able to bloom even in difficulty. Gratitude deepens when you see that karma, in all its forms, is not against you but guiding you, always pointing you toward greater awareness, compassion, and balance. When you live this way, karma ceases to be a source of fear and becomes a source of reverence. Gratitude is not just for the sweet fruits but for the bitter ones too, because both nourish growth in different ways. Life's lessons, though sometimes harsh, are always instructive. Gratitude grows when you realize that every experience, pleasant or painful, is part of your unfolding path. And as this gratitude for karma takes root, the journey opens further. Each step you take, each lesson you receive, each seed you plant, connects you more deeply to the earth beneath your feet. The practice of gratitude moves from the realm of thought into movement, into the simple act of walking. The next lesson invites you to recognize that every step is a thank you to the ground that holds you, to the earth that sustains you, to the path that never fails to meet your feet. Karma shows you that every action carries a lesson, every moment a chance to grow. Gratitude blossoms not only in what pleases you, but also in what challenges you, because both are part of the same unfolding path. Yet lessons are not always found in reflection or memory. They can also be discovered in the simplest act of being alive right now. Few practices reveal this more clearly than walking meditation. Each step is a reminder of the earth that holds you, of the connection between your body and the ground, of the life that quietly supports you with every movement. Gratitude deepens when walking is no longer just a way of moving, but a way of thanking. Walking is often treated as a means to an end, a way to get from one place to another. But in mindful walking, the journey itself is the destination. Every step becomes a chance to return to presence, to feel the contact of your foot with the ground, to notice the rhythm of your body in motion. Gratitude grows when you stop rushing past these details and start honoring them. Each step whispers, "I am alive. Each step says, "The earth supports me." Walking becomes prayer, a constant thank you offered to the ground beneath you. The practice begins with awareness of contact. As your foot touches the earth, notice the firmness, the softness, the texture. Gratitude arises for the stability of the ground, for its quiet willingness to carry you without complaint. This recognition brings humility. You realize that no step is possible without the earth beneath. Gratitude becomes embodied, felt not as an idea but as weight and balance, as the ground meeting your body again and again. Walking meditation also slows the mind. The steady rhythm of steps grounds you, drawing attention away from restless thoughts into direct experience. Gratitude grows when you realize that the earth itself anchors you, calming your mind not through effort, but through its steady presence. Each step becomes a reminder that peace is available, that you are already supported, that you do not need to run anywhere to find it. This practice also teaches reverence for the body. Walking reveals muscles, balance, breath, coordination, all working together to carry you forward. Gratitude arises for legs that move, for lungs that expand with effort, for the body's quiet strength. Even if there is pain or stiffness, gratitude grows when you see that your body continues to serve you, step after step, without demanding recognition. Walking meditation transforms movement into appreciation for the gift of embodiment itself. Each step is also a reminder of interconnection. The earth beneath your feet is not inert, it is alive with history, with minerals from ancient mountains, with soil that once held forests, with the ashes of ancestors. Gratitude deepens when you realize that you are not walking on dead matter, but on a living ground that has nourished countless beings before you. Every step connects you to time, to generations, to the cycles of life. Walking meditation reveals the miracle of balance. Each step is a delicate act, shifting weight, finding stability, moving forward without falling. Gratitude grows when you see how this balance mirrors life itself. Just as you cannot stay frozen in one step, you cannot stay frozen in one moment. You must move, adjust, trust the next placement. Gratitude arises for this lesson carried in the body. Balance is not stillness, but constant adaptation, and the earth is always there to catch you. The practice also teaches patience. Walking slowly, deliberately, is a challenge in a world of haste. Yet, as you slow down, gratitude deepens. You see that the earth does not rush. The ground waits quietly for your step. Gratitude grows as you realize that life, too, can be lived without constant speed. That peace is found in steady presence rather than frantic motion. Walking with awareness also strengthens connection to nature. On grass, soil, sand, or stone, each surface teaches something new. Gratitude expands for the diversity of the earth, the coolness of morning dew, the warmth of sunlit pavement, the softness of moss, the firmness of rock. Each texture is a reminder of the earth's generosity, offering countless experiences beneath your feet. Gratitude becomes sensory, alive in touch, sound, and rhythm. This practice also reshapes your relationship with the environment. As you walk mindfully, you see the fragility of the ground soil eroded by misuse, paths worn by overuse, ecosystems threatened by neglect. Gratitude arises not only for what the earth gives, but also for the awareness that you must give back. Walking meditation becomes an act of stewardship, a vow to tread gently, to honor the ground that sustains you. Walking slowly also brings clarity about impermanence. Each footprint you leave behind fades quickly, erased by wind, water, or time. Gratitude grows when you see that this impermanence mirrors your life. Each step is unique, never to be repeated, disappearing even as it is made. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that this fleeting nature makes each step more precious, each moment more worthy of attention. Walking meditation also teaches equality. The earth does not discriminate. It supports every being, equally rich or poor, strong or weak, human or animal. Gratitude arises when you recognize this impartial generosity. Each step becomes a reminder that you are part of a larger whole, sustained by a ground that asks nothing in return. Gratitude flows as you honor this equality, as you see yourself not as separate, but as one among many held by the same earth. The practice also transforms suffering. When your heart feels heavy, walking slowly, step by step, brings relief. Each contact with the ground reminds you that you are not lost, not unsupported. Gratitude grows as you realize that the earth absorbs your weight, steadying you when life feels unstable. Walking becomes a way to release pain into the ground, to trust that you are carried even in hardship. Gratitude deepens because the earth offers comfort without words, without conditions. Walking with awareness also opens the senses. You notice birdsong, rustling leaves, the smell of soil, the feel of air. Gratitude arises for this symphony of life that often goes unnoticed in haste. Each step becomes an invitation to awaken, to thank not only the ground, but the entire environment that greets you as you move. Gratitude becomes a full-bodied experience, felt through sight, sound, smell, and touch. Walking meditation also teaches presence in community. When practiced with others, the steps align, creating a shared rhythm. Gratitude deepens when you feel this silent harmony, each person moving together, grounded in the same earth, breathing the same air. Gratitude here is not only for the ground, but for the connection that mindful walking creates between people, a unity beyond words. The practice also reveals joy in simplicity. No special tools, no elaborate rituals, only the body, the breath, and the ground. Gratitude arises for this simplicity, for the accessibility of the practice, for the reminder that peace is always within reach. Walking meditation strips away complication, leaving only the profound truth that being alive and taking steps is already enough. Walking with gratitude also changes how you view the future. Each step is both movement and arrival. You do not need to rush toward distant goals, because every step is complete in itself. Gratitude grows when you realize that you are already where you need to be, that each step contains wholeness. Gratitude arises for the journey itself, not for distant destinations. When practiced deeply, walking meditation transforms your relationship with the world. The ground is no longer taken for granted, but honored as a constant gift. Gratitude deepens until each step feels like bowing, each step an offering of thanks. Walking becomes prayer, not in words but in contact, not in ritual but in presence. As this practice settles into your heart, you begin to see that gratitude does not belong only to the visible and tangible. Beyond the earth beneath your feet, there are other gifts waiting: the silence that allows sound to exist, the pauses that shape life, the noble quiet that deepens presence itself. The path now leads from the ground that carries you into the silence that surrounds you, inviting you to meet gratitude in the absence of words. Each mindful step teaches you that gratitude is not found in arrival, but in presence, not in destinations, but in the journey itself. With every movement, the earth holds you, and the breath steadies you, reminding you of the quiet support that life offers endlessly. Yet, beneath footsteps and voices, beneath the rhythms of movement and sound, there is another gift that often goes unnoticed. It is the gift of silence, not emptiness as absence, but silence as fullness, as nourishment, as a teacher of depth. In Buddhism, this is called noble silence, a silence that is not just the lack of noise but the presence of awareness. Gratitude deepens when you discover that silence itself is a treasure, shaping how you hear, how you speak, and how you are with yourself and others. Silence is often feared. Many fill it with chatter, noise, or distraction, mistaking it for loneliness or void. But noble silence is different. It is a conscious turning inward, a choosing of stillness not as escape but as presence. Gratitude arises when you allow yourself to enter it, realizing that silence is not empty, it is alive with clarity, alive with space, alive with possibility. In silence, you meet yourself without disguise. The noise of the world fades, and what remains is the simple presence of your thoughts, your breath, your being. Gratitude grows when you see that silence is not an enemy, but a companion, a mirror that shows you what is often hidden beneath sound. In this mirror you encounter truths sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes healing that you might never notice otherwise. Gratitude comes when you realize silence gives you the chance to understand yourself more deeply. Silence also heightens awareness of sound. When you rest in noble silence, even the faintest noises become vivid: the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the soft rhythm of your own breath. Gratitude deepens because silence sharpens perception, reminding you that sound is a gift, not background. Words become more meaningful when born from silence, music more powerful when framed by quiet. Gratitude arises for the way silence gives sound its depth, turning hearing into listening. Noble silence also transforms speech. When you spend time in quiet, you discover how often words are unnecessary. The impulse to fill space softens, replaced by the wisdom of restraint. Gratitude grows when you realize that silence teaches you to speak with care, to value words not for their abundance, but for their truth. Speech becomes lighter, kinder, more deliberate. Gratitude arises for this discipline, for the way silence refines communication into something healing rather than harmful. Silence also deepens connection with others. In ordinary life, silence in conversation can feel awkward, something to be filled. But noble silence reveals that presence alone is enough. Sitting quietly with another, without words, creates intimacy deeper than dialogue. Gratitude grows when you experience this, when you see that silence itself can hold love, respect, and understanding. It teaches you that being with someone does not always require speaking. Sometimes the deepest gratitude is expressed in quiet companionship. The practice of silence also heals restlessness. In constant noise, the mind becomes agitated, always pulled outward. But in silence, the mind begins to settle, like water clearing after being stirred. Gratitude arises when you notice this calming, when silence offers rest to your weary thoughts. It is in silence that creativity returns, clarity surfaces, and peace emerges. Gratitude deepens because silence is medicine that costs nothing, always available, always waiting for you to enter. Silence is also a teacher of patience. Without distraction, you are forced to sit with yourself, with boredom, with discomfort. Gratitude grows when you see that this discipline strengthens you, that it teaches endurance and presence in ways that noise cannot. Silence shows you that you do not need constant stimulation to feel alive. Gratitude arises for the strength silence builds, for the resilience it nurtures. In noble silence, time feels different. Moments stretch and deepen, free from the rush of constant activity. Gratitude grows when you realize that silence reveals the abundance of time, that stillness is not wasted but full. Each second feels richer, more complete, because it is experienced without interruption. Gratitude arises for this change of pace, for the way silence restores your relationship with time itself. Silence also nurtures compassion. When the noise quiets, you begin to hear the subtle suffering of yourself and others more clearly. Gratitude grows as you realize silence opens the heart, making space for tenderness. Words may not always heal, but presence does. Noble silence teaches you to offer presence without needing to fix or explain, and gratitude arises for this gentle power to care without words. The gift of noble silence also reshapes your relationship with the world. When you walk in silence, nature speaks more clearly. The forest becomes alive, the ocean more profound, the night sky more vast. Gratitude arises when you realize that silence is not absence, but communion, a way of listening to life directly without interference. In silence, you see more, hear more, feel more. Gratitude deepens because silence reveals the sacredness that is always present, but often missed. Noble silence also teaches humility. In quiet, you realize how much of life continues without your words, without your intervention. The sun rises, the rain falls, the earth turns, all without your commentary. Gratitude arises when you recognize that you are not the center of the universe, that silence places you back into harmony with what is greater than you. It humbles and frees you at the same time. In the discipline of silence, you also discover freedom from judgment. Without constant talking, you stop reinforcing fixed stories about yourself and others. Gratitude grows when you see how silence creates space for new possibilities, for new ways of seeing. In silence, labels fall away. You are no longer trapped in constant narratives. You simply are. Gratitude arises for this openness, for the way silence allows life to be fresh, alive, and unburdened. Silence also offers rest to relationships. Constant dialogue can exhaust, but shared silence refreshes. Gratitude grows when you see that silence can be love's language, that sitting quietly with family or friends can express connection more profoundly than words. Silence becomes gratitude embodied, a way of saying, "I am here," without sound. Noble silence also prepares the mind for wisdom. The teachings of life are subtle, easily drowned by noise. In silence, you begin to hear them. Gratitude arises for the insights that surface only when you are still, the realization of impermanence, the clarity of interconnection, the awareness of what truly matters. Silence does not add knowledge. It clears space for wisdom to arise. Gratitude deepens because silence becomes the ground for awakening. Silence teaches that presence is enough. You do not need to prove yourself with endless explanations, achievements, or words. In silence, being is sufficient. Gratitude arises for this simplicity, for the relief of resting in presence without performance. Silence teaches you to value yourself, not for what you produce or say, but for the simple fact of being alive. Gratitude for silence also expands into daily life. You begin to value pauses in conversation, quiet mornings, moments between tasks. These gaps are no longer emptiness to be filled, but gifts to be honored. Gratitude grows when you see silence as nourishment, as necessary as food and water. Each pause becomes sacred, each quiet moment a reminder of life's depth. As noble silence settles in the heart, gratitude becomes more refined. You begin to thank not only what you hear, but also what you do not hear, not only what is present, but what is absent. Silence teaches that fullness includes emptiness, that sound is made meaningful by quiet, that presence is deepened by stillness. Gratitude arises not as reaction, but as a way of being, rooted in the silent ground of awareness. And from here, the journey unfolds further. Having learned gratitude in the stillness of silence, you begin to see that every encounter, every person who crosses your path, carries a lesson. Silence reveals truths that words often conceal. In noble quiet, you begin to feel the depth of presence, the richness that comes when you stop filling every moment with sound. That same awareness, once carried into daily life, uncovers something even more profound. Every encounter is a teaching, every person a messenger. Whether gentle or harsh, kind or challenging, the people you meet are part of your path. Gratitude deepens when you begin to see that no meeting is random, that each interaction holds wisdom waiting to be received. The value of seeing each encounter as a teacher is that it dissolves the illusion of accidents. When someone speaks harshly, it is easy to react with defensiveness or anger. But when you view them as a teacher, the question shifts from, "Why are they treating me this way?" to, "What can I learn here?" Gratitude arises because the sting becomes a mirror, showing you where patience, compassion, or humility still need strengthening. The encounter itself becomes a lesson in growth. Kind encounters also carry teachings, though they are easier to overlook. A smile from a stranger, a gesture of generosity, a word of encouragement, these teach you about the power of kindness, about the ways small actions ripple outward. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that such moments are reminders of how you, too, can be a source of light for others. Every act of kindness becomes a teacher, and gratitude flows when you honor the lesson it offers. Some encounters reveal your own limitations. A person may trigger irritation, jealousy, or fear, not because of who they are, but because they touch something unresolved within you. Gratitude grows when you see this clearly. Instead of blaming them, you recognize the opportunity they give you to look inward, to address your own shadows. Gratitude arises for their role in uncovering truths you might otherwise hide from yourself. Teachers also appear in those who challenge your perspective. Someone with different beliefs, lifestyles, or experiences can expand your understanding of the world. Gratitude emerges when you realize that disagreement is not a threat, but a chance to see through another lens. Each encounter stretches your awareness, loosens rigid thinking, and reveals the vast diversity of human experience. The lesson is humility, and gratitude deepens for the reminder that your view is not the only one. Even brief encounters can be profound. A short conversation, a glance, a passing interaction can plant seeds that grow for years. Gratitude arises when you see that no encounter is too small to matter. Each one contributes to the shaping of your path, often in ways you only understand later. The barista who greets you warmly, the stranger who offers directions, the child who laughs freely, all are teachers, showing you something about presence, about connection, about joy. Encounters with those in pain also carry lessons. Meeting someone who is suffering teaches compassion, reminding you of the fragility and resilience of life. Gratitude grows when you realize that their pain awakens tenderness in you, expanding your capacity for empathy. Even when you cannot solve their problem, the encounter teaches you the power of presence, of being with someone without turning away. Gratitude arises for the chance to learn love in action. Challenging encounters teach boundaries as well. Not every person will treat you with respect, and some lessons come through learning to say no, to step back, to protect your own well-being. Gratitude deepens when you see that even those who cross your boundaries are teachers, offering lessons in self-respect and clarity. The gratitude here is not for the harm, but for the wisdom gained in recognizing your own strength and your right to peace. Each encounter also teaches impermanence. People come and go, some staying briefly, others for decades. Gratitude arises when you realize that the temporariness of these relationships makes them precious. You cannot hold anyone forever, but you can honor the lessons they bring while they are with you. Gratitude deepens when you see that every farewell is also a teaching in letting go, every ending a reminder of the value of the time shared. Encounters with elders carry wisdom rooted in experience. Listening to their stories, their perspectives, teaches patience and respect for life's long journey. Gratitude grows when you see that their lessons are not abstract, but lived truths, shaped by years of trial and triumph. Their presence is a reminder that wisdom accumulates slowly, and gratitude arises for the chance to learn from their endurance. Encounters with children teach in a different way. Their openness, curiosity, and ability to be fully present are reminders of qualities you may have forgotten. Gratitude arises when their innocence rekindles your own capacity for wonder. Every question, every burst of laughter, every moment of unfiltered honesty becomes a teaching in how to live without overcomplicating life. Gratitude deepens when you allow their perspective to soften your own. Even encounters with enemies can be teachers. Those who oppose you reveal the intensity of your own attachments and challenge you to practice compassion where it feels most difficult. Gratitude arises when you see that enemies teach strength, patience, and forgiveness. Without them, virtues would remain untested. Gratitude deepens because you realize that the very people you resist may be shaping your path in profound ways. Animals, too, become teachers in encounters. A bird's flight, a dog's loyalty, a cat's stillness all offer lessons in simplicity and presence. Gratitude arises when you notice how much non-human beings reflect truths about life. Their teachings are silent, but no less powerful. Gratitude deepens for the reminder that wisdom is not confined to human words, but is present in all of life's expressions. Encounters with nature itself are teachers. A storm teaches impermanence and power. A mountain teaches endurance. A river teaches flow. Gratitude arises when you recognize that walking outside is entering a classroom where every element offers a lesson. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the earth has been teaching all along, waiting only for you to listen. Some encounters are with yourself. Looking in the mirror, sitting in solitude, reflecting on your actions, these are meetings too. Gratitude grows when you realize that self-encounters are among the most profound teachers, revealing honesty, growth, and the need for compassion toward yourself. Gratitude deepens when you see that every reflection is a chance to learn, to adjust, to begin again. Seeing each encounter as a teacher also transforms conflict. Instead of resenting difficulty, you begin to look for the lesson. Gratitude arises when you see that conflict reveals hidden truths about communication, about values, about fears. Gratitude deepens when you learn to thank the conflict for what it shows, even while working to resolve it with wisdom and care. Gratitude also arises for encounters that inspire. Meeting someone who embodies compassion, resilience, or clarity plants seeds of aspiration in your own heart. Gratitude grows when their presence shows you what is possible, expanding your vision of who you can become. Every inspiring figure is a teacher, not because they give you answers, but because they awaken your own potential. When you view life this way, gratitude becomes continuous. No encounter is wasted, no meeting trivial. Each person becomes part of your journey, carrying lessons you need at that moment. Gratitude deepens when you see that life itself is the teacher, presenting lessons in the form of people, experiences, and relationships. Every encounter offers a mirror, a teaching, a reminder that life itself is the greatest classroom. Gratitude arises when you see that nothing is wasted, that even the most difficult meetings reveal wisdom. Yet, as powerful as these lessons are, they point toward an even deeper truth. You cannot hold on to any of them forever. Teachers appear and pass, relationships shift, experiences end, and moments fade. Gratitude grows not only in receiving, but also in releasing. To let go is to honor the impermanence of life, to thank what has served its purpose, and to open space for what is yet to come. Letting go is often misunderstood as loss or defeat, but in truth, letting go is an act of liberation. When you release what no longer serves you, possessions, attachments, expectations, you discover freedom, and with that freedom comes gratitude. Gratitude for the space created, gratitude for the lightness of being, gratitude for the clarity that arrives when clutter, both inner and outer, is removed. Possessions are one of the clearest examples. The more you accumulate, the more you feel weighed down, tied to objects that demand care, protection, and attention. Letting go of excess reveals that you never needed as much as you thought. Gratitude arises for the few things that remain, cherished because they are no longer drowned in abundance. A simple cup, a single book, a trusted tool, each becomes precious when not lost in a crowd of unnecessary items. Gratitude deepens because you realize value is not in quantity, but in sufficiency. Letting go also applies to attachments, the invisible bonds of craving and clinging. Whether to people, experiences, or identities, attachment creates suffering when you demand permanence from what is impermanent. To release attachment is not to stop loving or caring, it is to stop grasping. Gratitude arises when love is freed from clinging, when presence is valued without the need to possess. You thank the moment, the person, the experience for what it gives now, without burdening it with demands to last forever. Gratitude deepens because you see that freedom and love are not opposites but companions. Expectations are another form of weight. Life rarely unfolds according to your plans, and the tighter you cling to them, the more disappointment follows. Letting go of rigid expectations opens you to reality as it is, not as you wished it to be. Gratitude arises when you release the need for control and discover the beauty of what actually arrives. Instead of resenting the difference between what you wanted and what you received, you thank life for surprising you, for teaching you flexibility, for showing you possibilities you never imagined. Gratitude deepens because each moment becomes a gift rather than a test. Letting go also reveals the lesson of impermanence in a direct way. Everything you cling to will one day slip from your grasp. Possessions will decay, relationships will shift, even the body will fade. Gratitude grows when you accept this truth, not with despair, but with reverence. To let go is to honor the reality of change, to say thank you for what has passed, and to trust that space opens for new beginnings. Gratitude deepens because you stop fighting against the flow of life, and instead move with it, lighter and freer. The act of letting go also brings peace to the mind. Holding on whether to grudges, regrets, or desires creates constant tension. Release dissolves that strain, leaving room for calm. Gratitude arises for the relief, for the space in the mind once consumed by endless repetition. To forgive, to release resentment, to let past mistakes fall away, is to thank yourself for choosing peace over bitterness. Gratitude deepens as you realize that letting go is not only an act toward others, but a gift of healing to yourself. Letting go also awakens creativity. When life is cluttered with attachments and possessions, there is little room for inspiration. Releasing opens space, and in that space, new ideas, new insights, and new possibilities emerge. Gratitude grows as you realize that emptiness is not void but fertile ground. Letting go of the old makes way for the new, and gratitude arises for the courage it takes to create space. This practice also teaches humility. Letting go means accepting that you do not control everything, that life is larger than your plans. Gratitude arises when humility replaces pride, when you bow to the flow of existence rather than resist it. Gratitude deepens because humility brings peace, dissolving the constant struggle to make life conform to your will. Letting go also refines relationships. When you release the need to control others, to mold them to your expectations, love becomes lighter. Gratitude arises for the freedom this gives both you and them. Each person is allowed to be as they are, and you are freed from disappointment when they do not match your image. Gratitude deepens when relationships are built on presence rather than possession, on acceptance rather than demand. This practice also extends to identity. Many cling tightly to roles, achievements, or labels, believing them to be permanent. But identities shift what you do, how others see you, even how you see yourself. Letting go of rigid identity brings relief. Gratitude arises when you see that you are more than a single definition, that you can change, adapt, and grow. Gratitude deepens when you realize that letting go of who you were makes space for who you can become. Letting go also applies to time. Many people cling to the past, replaying regrets or longing for what once was. Others grasp at the future, anxious for what has not yet come. Letting go of these attachments brings you back to now, the only place where gratitude can truly live. Gratitude arises when you release the burden of what cannot be changed or predicted, and instead thank the present moment for what it offers. Gratitude deepens because you discover the fullness of life here, not elsewhere. Even spiritual practice requires letting go, clinging to progress, to achievements, to the idea of enlightenment itself creates suffering. Gratitude arises when you release the pressure to reach a destination and instead honor the practice itself. Each breath, each step, each moment of awareness becomes enough. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the path is not about arriving, but about being, about letting go again and again. Letting go also teaches generosity. When you release possessions, you create opportunities to share. Gratitude arises when you see that giving is not losing, but gaining the joy of lightness, the joy of connection, the joy of supporting others. Gratitude deepens because generosity transforms both giver and receiver, reminding you that abundance is not what you keep, but what you release. This practice also strengthens resilience. When life forces you to let go through loss, change, or endings, you discover strength you did not know you had. Gratitude arises for this resilience, for the ability to stand even when the ground shifts. Gratitude deepens when you see that letting go does not break you, but remakes you, each release shaping you into someone more flexible, more open, more alive. Letting go also nurtures joy. When the weight of clinging is gone, life feels lighter. Simple things bring delight because they are not overshadowed by endless craving. Gratitude arises when you notice how much freer you feel with less, how joy blooms in space rather than clutter. Gratitude deepens because you discover that happiness is not in holding tightly, but in releasing gently. Ultimately, letting go is an act of trust. Trust that life will bring what you need. Trust that endings make way for beginnings. Trust that emptiness is fertile. Gratitude arises when you surrender to this trust, when you stop grasping at control and allow life to flow. Gratitude deepens when you realize that, in letting go, you gain not less but more peace, more clarity, more freedom. Letting go teaches you that freedom does not come from holding tightly, but from releasing gently, from trusting that life gives and takes in its own rhythm. When the weight of clinging falls away, a new kind of clarity emerges, a deeper appreciation for what remains. And among all the things that remain, none is more precious than the simple act of being alive. To wake up in the morning is not ordinary. It is a miracle so easily overlooked. Gratitude takes its purest form when you open your eyes and recognize the gift of another day, a gift that billions did not receive. Waking up is often treated as routine, as though the body owes you another sunrise. Yet the truth is more fragile. Every night is a surrender, every morning a renewal. Gratitude arises when you remember that life is not guaranteed, that each awakening is a rare chance. To breathe, to rise, to see the world again, these are privileges, not promises. When you start your day with this awareness, the entire rhythm of life changes. The Buddhist practice of acknowledging life's rarity upon waking is both simple and profound. Instead of rushing into tasks or distractions, you pause and recognize the miracle of survival. Gratitude grows as you whisper inwardly, "I have woken up. I have this day. I will live it with care." These words are not superstition but a reminder that today is a treasure you may never hold again. This awareness reshapes mornings. The first breath after waking becomes a source of wonder. The sunlight through the window, a blessing. The touch of the floor beneath your feet, a reminder of grounding. Gratitude deepens when you meet these simple experiences, not with indifference, but with reverence. To start the day in this way is to frame everything that follows as part of a sacred gift. When you see waking as a miracle, urgency softens. The day is no longer about racing toward endless tasks, but about honoring what you have been given. Gratitude arises when you recognize that simply being alive is enough, that everything else is secondary. This shift reduces stress, replacing it with presence. Gratitude deepens because life feels less like a burden to carry and more like a blessing to savor. This practice also transforms how you meet difficulties. When the baseline of gratitude is simply being alive, even challenges are reframed. A problem at work, a disagreement, an inconvenience. These may still cause discomfort, but they no longer overshadow the miracle of waking. Gratitude arises because difficulties are seen against the backdrop of life itself, and life itself remains precious. Waking with awareness also reshapes relationships. When you start the day knowing its fragility, you treat others with more tenderness. Gratitude grows when you greet loved ones with the recognition that this moment with them may never return. A simple "good morning" becomes more than words. It becomes an acknowledgement of shared existence in this fleeting time. Gratitude deepens when each interaction carries the weight of life's rarity. This practice also changes how you view time. Instead of treating the day as a blur of hours to be filled, you see each moment as unrepeatable. Gratitude arises when you notice the uniqueness of the morning breeze, the taste of breakfast, the sound of birds. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the richness of life is found in presence, not in accumulation of hours. Waking up as a miracle also strengthens resilience. When you frame life as a rare gift, setbacks lose some of their power. Gratitude arises because even in difficulty, you are still alive, still breathing, still capable of growth. This perspective does not erase pain, but gives it context. Gratitude deepens when you see that survival itself is victory, that waking grants you another chance to begin again. The practice also nurtures humility. Life is not something you command, it is something granted, moment by moment. Gratitude arises when you recognize that waking is not your achievement, but a gift beyond your control. This humility softens pride and fosters reverence. Gratitude deepens when you see that every day is borrowed, every breath a loan from the universe. Waking with gratitude also awakens purpose. When you recognize that today may be your last, you ask, "How will I live it?" Gratitude arises when you see that this awareness sharpens priorities, guiding you toward kindness, presence, and meaning. Gratitude deepens when you realize that each morning is an invitation not just to exist, but to live deliberately. This practice also teaches compassion. When you realize the rarity of waking, you see that others too walk this fragile path. Gratitude arises when you look at another person and remember they too have been given this day. They too are living a rare gift. Gratitude deepens when compassion flows naturally from this awareness, shaping how you treat others with patience and care. The miracle of waking also reminds you of interconnection. You are alive not by yourself, but because of countless conditions: air to breathe, a heart that continues beating, a world that sustains you. Gratitude arises when you see that waking is not only your miracle, but the result of an entire universe working together. Gratitude deepens when you bow inwardly to this web of life that makes your morning possible. This awareness also softens regret. When you wake with gratitude, you remember that today is new, unshaped, unspoiled. Gratitude arises because you are not bound only by the past. You are free to live differently now. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that each morning offers renewal, a chance to practice again, to love again, to begin again. The practice also teaches presence with mortality. Each morning reminds you that one day you will not wake, that life is finite. Gratitude arises when you hold this truth not with fear but with reverence. Gratitude deepens when mortality sharpens appreciation, making every day more vivid, every encounter more sacred, every breath more worthy of thanks. When waking is treated as miracle, even small things glow. The warmth of water on your face, the stretch of your body, the quiet of early hours, all become blessings. Gratitude arises when you stop treating mornings as obstacles to endure and start honoring them as sacred beginnings. Gratitude deepens when you see that these ordinary details are extraordinary in their own right. Waking with awareness also nurtures discipline. Starting the day with gratitude shapes how you carry the hours ahead. Gratitude arises when you realize that beginning in reverence sets a tone of mindfulness that ripples into work, relationships, and rest. Gratitude deepens when you see that discipline is not a burden but a devotion, a way of honoring the gift of another day. This practice also brings peace. When you wake with gratitude, the noise of comparison and craving loses power. Gratitude arises because you are already satisfied with the miracle of being alive. Gratitude deepens when you realize that no achievement, no possession, no status can equal the simple gift of waking to another day. Each morning is a reminder that life is temporary, fragile, and rare. Gratitude grows when you remember this, when you start the day not with complaint, but with reverence. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that waking itself is the foundation of joy, the first gift, the one upon which all others rest. Waking each morning as though it were the rarest of miracles changes everything. You begin the day with reverence, aware that life has been granted once again, aware that this chance is not guaranteed. And from this deep sense of gratitude, the heart naturally expands beyond itself. It is not enough to simply be alive. There is a call to use this life well. Out of that awareness arises one of the most beautiful expressions of Buddhist practice, the Bodhisattva ideal. To live not only for personal freedom, but for the awakening of all beings. To see service itself as the highest form of gratitude is to embody a joy that no self-centered pursuit can offer. The Bodhisattva path is rooted in gratitude for existence, but it is expressed through service. Instead of hoarding wisdom, you share it. Instead of striving only for your own release from suffering, you vow to walk alongside others, supporting their journey as if it were your own. Gratitude arises when you recognize that the ability to serve is itself a privilege, that to be in a position to help even one being is to be entrusted with something sacred. Service on this path is not about grand gestures or recognition. It is about presence, patience, and compassion in the smallest acts. Listening without judgment, offering kindness where it is needed, giving time to someone in distress, these are the everyday forms of the Bodhisattva spirit. Gratitude deepens when you see that no act of service is wasted, that even the simplest gesture can ease suffering and ripple outward in ways you may never know. The Bodhisattva ideal also teaches that service is not a burden but a joy. Gratitude arises when you discover that helping others nourishes your own heart, that compassion gives energy rather than depletes it. In serving, you are reminded of interconnection, that others' happiness is tied to your own, that their relief from suffering lightens the world for everyone. Gratitude deepens when you see that service is not sacrifice, but participation in the great web of life. To walk this path requires humility. The Bodhisattva does not serve from a place of superiority, but from recognition of shared humanity. Gratitude arises when you remember that you, too, have been carried by countless others, the teachers who guided you, the strangers who helped you, the earth itself sustaining you. Service then becomes not an obligation, but a way of repaying a debt that can never truly be repaid. Gratitude deepens when you bow inwardly to this cycle of giving and receiving, knowing that by serving others, you are honoring all that has been given to you. The Bodhisattva ideal also reframes difficulty. When someone is unkind, instead of responding with resentment, you see an opportunity to practice patience and compassion. Gratitude arises when you realize that even those who challenge you are offering a chance to strengthen your practice. The gratitude is not for the harm itself, but for the wisdom it allows you to cultivate. Service then extends even to those who oppose you, because you understand they too are suffering, and your role is to ease, not to judge. This path also teaches the value of perseverance. The Bodhisattva vow is vast offering to serve all beings across endless time. Gratitude arises when you see that this vow is not meant to be completed, but to keep the heart open. The joy is not in finishing, but in continuing, in dedicating each step to something larger than yourself. Gratitude deepens when you realize that endless service is not exhausting but liberating, because it frees you from the narrow confines of self-concern. Service also transforms your relationship with purpose. Many search endlessly for meaning, but the Bodhisattva knows that purpose is found in service itself. Gratitude arises when you realize that you do not need to wait for grand opportunities to matter. Each interaction is already an opportunity to serve. Gratitude deepens when you live with this awareness, when each moment becomes meaningful simply because it allows you to offer kindness. The Bodhisattva ideal also reveals that gratitude for life cannot be separated from responsibility. To be alive while others suffer is to be called to respond. Gratitude arises not only in enjoying your blessings, but in using them to uplift others. Gratitude deepens when you realize that privilege is not something to cling to, but something to share. That joy multiplies when it is spread. This path also reshapes how you view your own suffering. Instead of seeing pain as something to escape alone, you recognize it as a bridge to others. Gratitude arises when you see that your hardships make you more compassionate, more capable of understanding the struggles of those around you. Gratitude deepens when you realize that service is not about being perfect, but about being real, about using even your wounds as sources of connection and healing. The Bodhisattva way also teaches the beauty of anonymity. To serve without recognition, to give without expectation of thanks, is to embody pure compassion. Gratitude arises when you experience the quiet joy of helping unseen, when you realize that the act itself is its own reward. Gratitude deepens when you free yourself from the need for acknowledgement, finding fulfillment in the giving itself. Walking this path also transforms fear. The Bodhisattva does not fear suffering or death, because service gives life a depth beyond individual survival. Gratitude arises when you see that to live for others is to transcend fear, to anchor your existence in something enduring. Gratitude deepens when you realize that your actions continue through others, that service leaves traces beyond your own lifetime. The practice also cultivates boundless compassion. Gratitude arises when you recognize that every being, no matter how lost or broken, has Buddha nature, the potential for awakening. Gratitude deepens when you realize that by serving others, you are honoring that potential, watering seeds that may bloom far beyond your sight. The Bodhisattva ideal also reminds you that service is not about perfection, but sincerity. Gratitude arises when you realize that you do not need to solve all problems. To serve, you only need to show up with presence and care. Gratitude deepens when you release the pressure of saving the world and embrace the joy of helping in the ways you can, here and now. In practicing this ideal, you begin to see that gratitude itself becomes service. A grateful heart radiates kindness, patience, and generosity. To live with gratitude is to serve without effort, because gratitude naturally flows outward in care for others. Gratitude deepens when you see that your very way of being can become a gift to the world. Serving others with a grateful heart opens life in ways self-interest never can. When you live to uplift, your days carry meaning far beyond personal gain. Yet even the most devoted service is shaped by a truth that none can avoid. Time is finite. However much compassion you cultivate, however much wisdom you share, there will come a morning you do not rise. This is not a cause for despair, but a call to live more fully, to honor every breath, every encounter, every act, as if it were your last. In Buddhist teaching, this awareness is called maranasati, the contemplation of death. To reflect on mortality is not to invite fear, but to awaken gratitude for this very day, this borrowed span of hours that has been placed in your hands. Awareness of death strips away illusion. So often people live as though tomorrow is guaranteed, as though life stretches endlessly before them. Plans are made, time is wasted, gratitude postponed. But death reminds you that the only day you can touch is today. Gratitude arises when you recognize that this day is not owed to you, that to wake and move through it is a privilege. Gratitude deepens when you see that this borrowed day demands presence, not distraction. Contemplating death sharpens priorities. Many of the things that seem urgent, status, possessions, trivial arguments fade in significance when viewed against mortality. What remains are the essentials: kindness, love, awareness, service. Gratitude arises when you realize that death clarifies what matters, teaching you not to squander time on what does not nourish. Gratitude deepens when you live each day aligned with values that will still matter on your last breath. This practice also brings tenderness to relationships. Awareness of death reminds you that every meeting could be the final one, every conversation the last. Gratitude arises when you approach others with this awareness, treating each word as precious, each moment together as sacred. Gratitude deepens when you no longer take loved ones for granted, when farewells are softened with care, when anger dissolves because you know the chance to love is fleeting. Maranasati also softens fear of death itself. By contemplating mortality daily, death becomes less of a shock and more of a companion. Gratitude arises when you realize that this reflection frees you from the constant anxiety of avoidance. Gratitude deepens when you discover that thinking of death makes life richer, not poorer, because it anchors you in what is real. Awareness of death also teaches humility. No matter your accomplishments, death will level them. Gratitude arises when you see this not as negation, but as balance. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that death places all beings on equal ground, reminding you to live not with arrogance, but with reverence. This reflection also strengthens compassion. When you remember that others too are mortal, you meet their struggles with gentleness. Gratitude arises when you realize that everyone shares the same fragility, the same uncertainty. Gratitude deepens when compassion flows more easily, when you no longer waste time in harshness, but instead use your days to ease the burden of others. Contemplating death also enhances presence. Each sight, sound, and breath takes on a heightened clarity when you know it may be the last. Gratitude arises when you notice the beauty of a single sunrise, the taste of food, the warmth of touch. Gratitude deepens when these ordinary moments are no longer dismissed but treasured as the essence of life. Maranasati also cultivates resilience. When challenges arise, awareness of death puts them into perspective. Gratitude arises when you see that many worries shrink when measured against mortality. Gratitude deepens when you find strength in knowing that if this is your last day, you would rather meet it with courage than complaint. The contemplation of death also teaches acceptance. Life ends whether you resist or not. Gratitude arises when you release the struggle to deny it, when you bow to impermanence as part of the natural order. Gratitude deepens when acceptance brings peace, allowing you to live with more ease, knowing that nothing is permanent, but that every moment can be honored. Maranasati sharpens your relationship with time. Every hour becomes meaningful, every choice more deliberate. Gratitude arises when you recognize that life is not measured in years but in presence. Gratitude deepens when you no longer delay gratitude for another day but cultivate it now, in this breath, in this moment. The practice also nurtures joy. Far from being morbid, awareness of death illuminates the sweetness of life. Gratitude arises when you see that fragility makes everything more precious: the laughter of a child, the quiet of evening, the chance to serve. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the beauty of life is inseparable from its impermanence, that transience is what gives it meaning. Maranasati also teaches liberation from clinging. Death will strip away all possessions, roles, and identities. Gratitude arises when you see this as a reminder to let go now, to travel lightly. Gratitude deepens when you live with less attachment, more freedom, and greater appreciation for what is here in the present. This practice also inspires service. Knowing that time is short, you are moved to use it wisely, to contribute rather than consume. Gratitude arises when you see each day as a chance to give, to lighten another's load, to sow seeds that may grow after you are gone. Gratitude deepens when you realize that service is one of the few legacies that death cannot erase. Awareness of death also transforms how you view endings. Each sunset, each farewell, each completed task becomes a small rehearsal for the final release. Gratitude arises when you begin to honor endings as sacred, not as failures. Gratitude deepens when you see that endings create space for renewal, just as death creates space for life to continue. By practicing Maranasati, you live more awake. Gratitude arises when you remember that this day is borrowed, that it could vanish without notice. Gratitude deepens when you live each moment as if it were both the first and the last, with reverence, with presence, with love. Reflecting on death brings clarity to the present, showing that every day is borrowed and therefore precious. To wake with this knowledge is to live more deeply, to love more urgently, to waste less time on what does not matter. Yet gratitude does not only belong to the present moment or the awareness of life's brevity. It also reaches backward into the story that has carried you to this point. Every struggle, every mistake, every triumph has shaped the person who now stands here. Gratitude deepens when you learn to bow to the past, not to cling to it, not to resent it, but to thank it for shaping today's self. The past often feels like a burden. Regrets, losses, and pain leave scars that are difficult to accept. But when you look closer, even the hardest experiences contain lessons that changed you, strengths you would not have developed otherwise. Gratitude arises when you see that your wounds made you tender, your failures taught resilience, and your heartbreaks opened compassion. Gratitude deepens when you stop cursing the past for its difficulties and instead thank it for the wisdom those difficulties brought. Mistakes are often the hardest to embrace. They linger in memory, replayed with shame or guilt. Yet mistakes are teachers that no book or lecture could replace. Each wrong turn showed you something about yourself, about your choices, about life's direction. Gratitude grows when you realize that your current clarity was born from those errors. Without them, you might still be blind to certain truths. Gratitude deepens when you see mistakes not as stains, but as stepping stones, part of the path that made you wiser. Struggles, too, become sources of gratitude. The times you thought you would break, but somehow endured. The nights you felt lost, but still rose in the morning. These shaped a resilience you now carry. Gratitude arises when you see that those seasons of hardship taught you patience, humility, and strength. Gratitude deepens when you understand that suffering was not meaningless, but formative, giving you the depth to meet life with compassion for yourself and others. Triumphs, on the other hand, are easier to thank, but no less important to honor. Every success, every victory, every moment of joy built confidence and gave you reason to continue. Gratitude arises when you look back and see how far you have come, how many challenges you have already faced and overcome. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that triumphs remind you of your capacity to grow, to create, to achieve, and to live with purpose. Even seemingly ordinary moments of the past shaped you. Conversations, friendships, books, and places, all of them left imprints. Gratitude grows when you recognize that the person you are today is not separate from these influences. Gratitude deepens when you realize that nothing was wasted, that even the smallest encounter contributed to the whole of your becoming. Thanking the past also teaches forgiveness. Gratitude arises when you soften toward your younger self, who acted with limited understanding but did the best possible at the time. Gratitude deepens when forgiveness replaces judgment, when you can look back and say, "Thank you for trying," even when you failed. This shift transforms regret into compassion, allowing gratitude to flow even for the parts of your history you once rejected. The past also connects you to lineage. Ancestors, teachers, and those who came before all shaped the conditions of your life. Gratitude arises when you remember that your path is not yours alone, but built on countless lives lived before you. Gratitude deepens when you honor their struggles, knowing that without them, you would not be here. Thanking the past becomes not just personal but collective, an acknowledgement of the web of lives that carried you forward. This practice also dissolves resentment. Gratitude arises when you see that even those who hurt you shaped your growth. Even those who opposed you pushed you toward strength. Gratitude deepens when you understand that their role, though painful, contributed to your wisdom. Thanking the past does not mean condoning harm, but it means recognizing the lessons that suffering left behind. Thanking the past also strengthens resilience for the future. Gratitude arises when you look back and see how much you have already survived. Gratitude deepens when you realize that those experiences prepared you for what is to come. The past becomes a source of courage, reminding you that if you endured then, you can endure again. This practice also enriches joy. Gratitude arises when you recall moments of laughter, connection, and love that carried you through. Gratitude deepens when you realize that joy was always present, even in difficult seasons, and that these moments of light sustained you. Thanking the past for joy teaches you to notice and honor joy more fully in the present. By thanking the past, you also free yourself from clinging. Gratitude arises when you appreciate what has been without demanding that it return. Gratitude deepens when you release nostalgia and instead hold memories as gifts, complete in themselves. This freedom allows you to move forward without chains, carrying gratitude instead of longing. The practice also cultivates humility. Gratitude arises when you admit that you are not self-made, that your life was shaped by countless conditions. Gratitude deepens when you bow to the complexity of causes that formed you, recognizing that every chapter of your past, whether chosen or not, contributed to the present self. Thanking the past also teaches presence. Gratitude arises when you see that the past has already given its gifts, that today is where those gifts are meant to be lived. Gratitude deepens when you stop reliving old stories and instead honor them by embodying their lessons now. The past becomes not a prison, but a foundation, steadying you in the present. This reflection also fosters compassion for others. Gratitude arises when you recognize that everyone carries a past filled with struggles, mistakes, and triumphs. Gratitude deepens when you treat others with the same compassion you have learned to give yourself, honoring their journeys as worthy of respect and understanding. Thanking the past also reshapes how you see time. Gratitude arises when you understand that life is a continuum, each moment shaping the next. Gratitude deepens when you see that the present is not separate from the past, but it's flowering. Every joy, every sorrow, every lesson blooms into now, and gratitude flows when you see that none of it was wasted. To thank the past is to honor life in its entirety. Gratitude arises when you bow to every moment that brought you here, when you embrace even the parts you once wished to erase. Gratitude deepens when you see that nothing could be left out, that the whole of your history shaped the whole of who you are. Thanking the past allows you to see how every struggle, mistake, and triumph carved the ground beneath your feet today. Gratitude blooms when you embrace those chapters, not as chains to hold you, but as roots that gave you strength. Yet if gratitude for the past steadies you, there is another step that frees you even more fully, the practice of meeting life as though for the first time. This is Shoshin, the beginner's mind. To live with beginner's mind is to release the burden of old judgments and fixed ideas, to look at each experience with openness and curiosity. Gratitude deepens when you stop expecting life to repeat itself and instead allow it to unfold fresh in every moment. Beginner's mind teaches you that knowledge, while useful, can sometimes narrow your vision. The more you think you already know, the less you truly see. Gratitude arises when you let go of rigid certainty and open yourself to wonder again. Gratitude deepens when you realize that every sunrise, though familiar, is new. Every conversation, though with the same person, is different. Every breath, though countless, is unrepeatable. The beginner's mind transforms routine into miracle. This practice is not about forgetting the past, but about not being imprisoned by it. Gratitude arises when you release the weight of past disappointments, allowing yourself to meet the present without the shadow of old pain. Gratitude deepens when you stop comparing today to yesterday and instead receive it as unique. Each moment becomes worthy of thanks because it has never happened before and will never happen again. Shoshin also teaches humility. To adopt a beginner's mind is to admit you do not have all the answers, that life is bigger than your understanding. Gratitude arises when you bow to this vastness, when you let yourself be a student of the world. Gratitude deepens when humility frees you from arrogance, opening the heart to constant learning. Every person becomes a teacher, every situation a classroom, and gratitude flows because the world is alive with lessons. This mindset also renews joy. Familiarity often dulls appreciation. You stop noticing what surrounds you because you believe you already know it. But with beginner's mind, you rediscover the texture of food, the sound of rain, the smile of a friend. Gratitude arises when you allow yourself to be surprised again. Gratitude deepens when joy emerges not from novelty, but from seeing the ordinary with fresh eyes. Shoshin is especially powerful in relationships. When you think you already know someone completely, you stop listening fully, stop noticing their changes. Gratitude arises when you meet even the most familiar person with openness, acknowledging that they are new in each moment, just as you are. Gratitude deepens when relationships are renewed daily, free from the weight of assumptions. Every conversation becomes discovery, every gesture a chance to learn. This practice also teaches patience. Beginner's mind accepts not knowing as part of the path. Gratitude arises when you allow yourself to rest in uncertainty, trusting that understanding will unfold in its own time. Gratitude deepens when you see that life's richness is not in rushing to answers, but in being present with the questions. Adopting beginner's mind also transforms failure. Instead of seeing mistakes as final judgments, you view them as opportunities to start again. Gratitude arises when you see failure as a teacher, not an enemy. Gratitude deepens when you realize that every attempt is valuable, that every effort moves you closer to wisdom, even when the outcome is not what you expected. Shoshin also sharpens awareness of impermanence. Each moment is fleeting, and beginner's mind honors this truth by treating each one as precious. Gratitude arises when you recognize the fragility of now. Gratitude deepens when you live with attentiveness, savoring each experience without clinging, knowing it will pass. The practice also frees you from comparison. Beginner's mind does not measure today against yesterday or yourself against others. Gratitude arises when you release the constant habit of ranking and instead rest in presence. Gratitude deepens when you discover contentment, not in being better, but in simply being awake to what is here. Shoshin also fosters creativity. When the mind is not bound by rigid categories or old habits, new possibilities open. Gratitude arises when you experience the freshness of imagination, when you allow playfulness to return. Gratitude deepens when you see that creativity is not limited to art, but is woven into every choice, every perspective, every way of meeting life with openness. Beginner's mind also deepens compassion. When you let go of labels and judgments, you see people as they are, rather than as you assume them to be. Gratitude arises when you notice the humanity of each person more clearly. Gratitude deepens when compassion flows naturally from this clarity, when you respond to others not with preconceptions, but with genuine presence. This practice also teaches freedom from pride. Knowledge and experience can create walls that separate you from others, but beginner's mind breaks those walls down. Gratitude arises when you release the need to always be the expert, to always be right. Gratitude deepens when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, to ask questions, to remain open. This openness creates space for deeper connection and for true growth. Shoshin also shows you the abundance of life. When you meet each experience as new, you realize that the world is full of infinite variety. Gratitude arises when you stop dismissing life as repetitive and instead see its endless depth. Gratitude deepens when every day feels like discovery, every moment like a gift. The practice also nurtures resilience. Beginner's mind embraces change without resistance because it does not cling to fixed ideas. Gratitude arises when you see that flexibility allows you to adapt to life's shifts. Gratitude deepens when you realize that resilience is not about force, but about openness, about meeting each change as an opportunity rather than a threat. In daily life, beginner's mind turns ordinary routines into sacred practices. Walking becomes gratitude for movement. Eating becomes gratitude for nourishment. Listening becomes gratitude for connection. Gratitude arises when you notice these simple things anew. Gratitude deepens when you see that beginner's mind transforms not by adding more, but by helping you see what was already there. Ultimately, Shoshin reminds you that life itself is always unfolding, always fresh, always offering chances to begin again. Gratitude arises when you stop treating life as predictable and instead welcome its surprises. Gratitude deepens when you live not as someone who has already arrived, but as someone always learning, always growing, always starting. Approaching life with beginner's mind opens the door to wonder. You begin to see the world not as something already known, but as something endlessly alive and surprising. And once the mind is softened in this way, gratitude no longer belongs only to grand experiences or rare moments of joy. It begins to flow into the simplest details of existence: the sunlight filtering through a window, the sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of laughter, the stillness of silence. When you learn to notice these ordinary sights and sounds, gratitude deepens into a way of being, because life reveals its beauty not only in extraordinary moments, but in the countless small miracles that sustain you every day. Sunlight is one of the simplest gifts, yet so often ignored. It spills across the earth without demand, nourishing plants, warming skin, and marking the rhythm of time. Gratitude arises when you pause to notice its presence, the way it paints the morning sky, the way it shifts through the hours, the way it makes life itself possible. Gratitude deepens when you realize that without sunlight, nothing could grow, no breath could be taken, no joy could unfold. To see sunlight not as background, but as blessing, is to live in continual thankfulness. Rain is another teacher of gratitude. For some, it is an inconvenience, but with awareness, it becomes a miracle. Each drop carries the gift of renewal, nourishing soil, filling rivers, quenching thirst. Gratitude arises when you hear the rhythm of rain on leaves, on rooftops, on earth, recognizing it as the sound of life replenishing itself. Gratitude deepens when you see that rain is not interruption, but generosity, falling freely, asking nothing in return. Even the grayest days reveal abundance when you learn to thank the rain. Laughter, too, is often overlooked. It rises suddenly, unplanned, and dissolves tension in an instant. Gratitude arises when you recognize laughter as medicine, a reminder of lightness, even in difficulty. Gratitude deepens when you cherish the shared joy it creates, the way it connects hearts without need for explanation. Each burst of laughter is proof that even in a world of suffering, joy still finds its way through. To thank laughter is to thank the resilience of the human spirit. Silence, though less obvious, is no less miraculous. It frames sound, gives meaning to words, and provides rest for the mind. Gratitude arises when you recognize that silence is not emptiness but fullness, a space where awareness expands. Gratitude deepens when you learn to rest in it, to value its depth as much as noise. Without silence, there would be no music, no clarity, no peace. Gratitude grows when you begin to see silence as a living presence, always available, always nourishing. Ordinary sights also reveal abundance. The colors of leaves changing with the seasons, the patterns of clouds drifting across the sky, the flicker of candlelight in the evening, all are miracles often passed by unnoticed. Gratitude arises when you pause to truly see, when you let your eyes rest long enough for beauty to reveal itself. Gratitude deepens when you realize that wonder is not hidden but overlooked, that the world is always offering beauty to those who are willing to look. The same is true of ordinary sounds, the rustling of trees, the hum of bees, the flow of water, even the rhythm of footsteps, all carry the music of life. Gratitude arises when you listen with care, when you stop treating these sounds as background and start honoring them as reminders of connection. Gratitude deepens when you realize that every sound is fleeting, unique to that moment, never to be heard in the same way again. Each one is worthy of thanks. Even the breath itself carries its own sound, soft and subtle, reminding you of life's continuity. Gratitude arises when you hear this rhythm, steady and quiet, sustaining you without demand. Gratitude deepens when you realize that this sound will one day cease, making every breath now an irreplaceable gift. To thank the sound of breath is to thank life itself, rising and falling with each inhale and exhale. Ordinary encounters also hold beauty. The sound of footsteps in a hallway, the sight of neighbors passing by, the murmur of conversation in a cafe, all are pieces of a larger symphony of human life. Gratitude arises when you see these as signs of connection, of community, of shared existence. Gratitude deepens when you realize that these sounds and sights mean you are not alone, that you are part of a world alive with movement and interaction. Even the most mundane details, the clinking of dishes, the turning of pages, the creak of a chair, become sacred when viewed with gratitude. Each is a reminder of being alive, of interacting with a world that responds, that speaks back in countless small ways. Gratitude arises when you honor these simple exchanges. Gratitude deepens when you understand that life is built not of rare events, but of countless small moments, each carrying beauty if only you pay attention. Seeing beauty in ordinary sights and sounds also teaches patience. Gratitude arises when you slow down enough to notice the play of light, the texture of fabric, the rhythm of a bird's call. Gratitude deepens when you realize that life does not need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. Presence reveals that the extraordinary is already here, woven into the ordinary. This practice also teaches humility. Gratitude arises when you realize that the world offers endless gifts without your effort. The sunrise, the rain, the laughter of others. Gratitude deepens when you bow inwardly to this generosity, recognizing that much of what sustains you is given freely, without condition. Gratitude for ordinary sights and sounds also transforms suffering. Even in difficulty, you can find moments of light, a warm patch of sunlight on your skin, the sound of wind moving through trees, a child's laughter breaking tension. Gratitude arises when you allow these moments to soothe you, to remind you that beauty persists even in hardship. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that life always carries both struggle and wonder, and that noticing the wonder sustains you through the struggle. By honoring ordinary sights and sounds, you begin to live more fully. Gratitude arises when you stop rushing past the details and start resting in them. Gratitude deepens when every day feels rich, not because of grand events, but because of the depth you bring to simple moments. Noticing beauty in the ordinary softens the heart, teaching you that life's treasures are not hidden in faraway places, but present in every sight, every sound, every fleeting moment. Yet gratitude can go even deeper, reaching into the very nature of who you believe you are. For beneath the ordinary lies the most profound of Buddhist insights, anatta, the truth of non-self. To realize non-self is to see that the I you cling to is not fixed or permanent, but a flowing constellation of causes and conditions. Gratitude arises not from defending the ego, but from releasing it, from awakening to the freedom that comes when the walls of separateness dissolve. The idea of self feels solid. You grow up with a name, a body, a story, and it becomes easy to believe that this collection is permanent, unchanging. Yet when examined closely, none of it is fixed. The body is constantly renewing itself, the mind is always shifting, and even your identity evolves through time. Gratitude arises when you realize that you are not trapped in one rigid definition. Gratitude deepens when you see that non-self is not erasure, but liberation, giving you the freedom to change, to grow, to be more than the roles and labels you once clung to. This realization also dissolves the burden of ego. Much of suffering comes from defending the idea of me, my pride, my status, my possessions. When you begin to see that this me is not solid, gratitude arises because the struggle softens. Gratitude deepens when you discover that without the constant weight of ego, life feels lighter, more open. You no longer need to prove yourself endlessly, because there is no fixed self to protect. Non-self also awakens compassion. When the walls between me and you soften, gratitude arises for the interconnectedness of life. Gratitude deepens when you realize that others are not separate from you, but part of the same flowing web of existence. Their suffering is not alien but shared, their joy not distant but resonant. Gratitude grows when you see that caring for others is not duty, but recognition that their life and your life are inseparable. Realizing non-self also changes how you view mistakes. When you believe in a solid self, failures feel like permanent stains on who you are. But with non-self, you see that no single act defines you, that identity is fluid. Gratitude arises when you release the weight of past errors. Gratitude deepens when you see mistakes as part of the stream of conditions, moments that teach without condemning. You thank them for shaping growth, but you do not cling to them as unchangeable truths. This insight also transforms your relationship with possessions. The ego clings to objects as extensions of self, my car, my home, my things. But when self is seen as empty, the hold weakens. Gratitude arises when you realize possessions are not who you are, that you can live with less without losing yourself. Gratitude deepens when you see that freedom from ownership allows you to appreciate objects for their function and beauty without letting them define you. Non-self also teaches humility. The idea of, I did this, I achieved this, is softened when you see that everything arises from countless conditions. Your successes are not yours alone, but the result of teachers, parents, communities, and even the elements of nature that sustained you. Gratitude arises when you bow to this truth, recognizing the network of support that makes life possible. Gratitude deepens when humility becomes natural, when you thank not only people, but the whole universe for your very being. This perspective also eases conflict. Many arguments arise from clashing egos, each defending its identity. Realizing non-self softens the need to win, the need to prove. Gratitude arises when you let go of defending I and instead listen with openness. Gratitude deepens when conflicts transform into opportunities for understanding, when relationships heal through humility rather than pride. Non-self also changes how you view impermanence. When you cling to a fixed self, aging and death feel terrifying, as if something solid is being destroyed. But when you see that the self was never solid to begin with, gratitude arises for the flow of life. Gratitude deepens when you accept aging as transformation, death as return, and each stage of existence as part of a larger unfolding. This realization also enhances joy in the present. Without the heavy burden of I and mine, you meet experiences more freely. Gratitude arises when you savor without clinging, love without possession, act without demand for recognition. Gratitude deepens when joy is found not in ownership, but in participation, in being part of life's flow. Non-self also dissolves comparison. Ego constantly measures, am I better, worse, greater, smaller? But with non-self, these comparisons lose their grip. Gratitude arises when you release the need to compete. When you stop binding your worth to others' paths. Gratitude deepens when you appreciate your journey as unique as one expression of countless conditions, neither superior nor inferior, but simply alive. The practice also reveals resilience. Ego fears change, but non-self welcomes it, knowing that identity is fluid. Gratitude arises when you adapt to shifts without fear of losing yourself. Gratitude deepens when you see that resilience is not resistance but openness, a willingness to let go of rigid identity and meet life as it comes. Realizing non-self also transforms love. Ego often makes love about possession, about you are mine. But when you release self, love becomes freer, more expansive. Gratitude arises when you experience love without grasping, caring without controlling. Gratitude deepens when you see love as a gift of connection, not a property to defend. Even suffering is softened through non-self. Pain feels unbearable when tied to identity. This is happening to me. But when the self is seen as fluid, suffering becomes part of the flow, not a fixed condemnation. Gratitude arises when you see that suffering too changes, that it does not define you. Gratitude deepens when compassion arises from this understanding, for yourself and for others who suffer. Non-self also opens the door to wonder. Gratitude arises when you realize that, without the burden of ego, the world shines more brightly. Gratitude deepens when you see that life itself is miraculous, that each moment is a gift, not belonging to you, but offered by existence itself. Living with gratitude for non-self does not erase individuality, it reveals interbeing. Gratitude arises when you see yourself not as isolated, but as part of a living whole. Gratitude deepens when you live lightly, humbly, openly, aware that the boundaries of self are illusions, and that life is richer when those walls fall away. Seeing through the illusion of self dissolves the walls that once kept you separate and heavy. Gratitude begins to flow more freely when you realize there is no permanent I to defend, no rigid ego to maintain, only a continuous stream of life moving through conditions. Yet even this insight does not arise on its own. It is the fruit of teachings passed down through centuries, preserved and shared so that countless seekers could awaken to truth. The Dharma is not just a set of ideas, it is a timeless gift, a guiding light that shows the way to gratitude itself. To honor the Dharma is to bow to the wisdom that makes freedom possible, to recognize that without it, these realizations would remain hidden in darkness. The Dharma is precious because it points to reality as it is. The world is full of noise, opinions, and illusions, but the teachings cut through confusion and reveal clarity. Gratitude arises when you see that the Dharma is like a mirror, showing you life as it truly is, rather than as you wish it to be. Gratitude deepens when you realize that this guidance spares you from wandering endlessly in ignorance, that it provides a path where otherwise there would be only uncertainty. The teachings are timeless because they speak not only to monks in ancient forests, but to every life, in every era. Gratitude arises when you notice that the same wisdom that calmed the minds of seekers thousands of years ago can also soothe the restlessness of today. Gratitude deepens when you realize that truth does not expire, that impermanence, compassion, mindfulness, and interdependence remain as relevant now as they were then. The Dharma also gives language to experiences you may feel but cannot name. Without it, awareness of impermanence, non-self, or compassion may appear vague or fleeting. The teachings crystallize these truths, turning them into practices that can be cultivated. Gratitude arises when you see that the Dharma offers not only insight, but method. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that it provides tools you can actually use to transform your life, rather than leaving wisdom as abstract thought. The Dharma is also a gift because it is freely given. Unlike treasures guarded for the few, the teachings have been shared across centuries without demand for ownership. Gratitude arises when you realize that this wisdom has been preserved not for profit, but for the benefit of all beings. Gratitude deepens when you remember the countless generations of practitioners who safeguarded it, memorized it, lived it, and transmitted it so that you might receive it today. The teachings also serve as a compass in moments of confusion. Life presents choices, conflicts, and difficulties that easily overwhelm. The Dharma points toward compassion, patience, and clarity as guiding principles. Gratitude arises when you experience the relief of direction in times of chaos. Gratitude deepens when you realize that with the Dharma, you never walk entirely blind. You always have a light to guide you through uncertainty. The Dharma also humbles the mind. Gratitude arises when you realize that the wisdom you follow is larger than your individual opinions or preferences. Gratitude deepens when you allow the teachings to reshape you, to challenge your assumptions, to expand your understanding beyond what your ego clings to. By surrendering to the Dharma, you grow not smaller, but freer. The teachings are also a refuge. In times of suffering, the Dharma offers solace by reminding you that pain is part of life, but not the entirety of it. Gratitude arises when you see that the Dharma does not deny suffering, but shows how to transform it into wisdom. Gratitude deepens when you find comfort in knowing that no matter the weight of hardship, the teachings provide a path to relief. The Dharma also teaches balance. In a world that swings between extremes of indulgence and denial, it offers the middle way. Gratitude arises when you discover the steadiness this brings, when you no longer feel pulled apart by opposing forces. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that balance is not mediocrity, but harmony, a way of walking with both freedom and responsibility. The teachings also nurture compassion. Gratitude arises when you see how the Dharma trains the heart to move beyond selfishness, to feel the suffering of others as your own. Gratitude deepens when you experience the joy of living with kindness, when you realize that compassion is not weakness, but strength, a strength born from wisdom rather than pride. The Dharma is also timeless because it adapts without losing its essence. Gratitude arises when you see that the teachings can be practiced in a temple, at home, at work, or in silence. Gratitude deepens when you realize that the Dharma is not bound to culture or time period, that it bends to meet the needs of every seeker while remaining rooted in truth. The gift of the Dharma also lies in its universality. Though born in a particular place, its essence speaks to all humanity. Gratitude arises when you realize that its insights into impermanence, suffering, compassion, and wisdom are human truths, not limited to any one group. Gratitude deepens when you see how it creates bridges between people, dissolving divisions by pointing to the common ground of shared humanity. The Dharma also encourages direct experience. Unlike systems that demand blind belief, it invites you to see for yourself, to test the teachings in your own life. Gratitude arises when you realize that you are trusted with this responsibility, that you do not need to surrender reason, but to cultivate awareness. Gratitude deepens when the teachings prove themselves through lived experience, showing their truth not through authority, but through transformation. This guidance also protects from despair. In a world filled with conflict and suffering, it is easy to feel hopeless. The Dharma reminds you that suffering is not the end, but the doorway to awakening. Gratitude arises when you see that even pain carries meaning within this framework. Gratitude deepens when you recognize that no matter how heavy life feels, the Dharma keeps the path open to peace. The Dharma also teaches interbeing. Gratitude arises when you understand through its wisdom that you are never alone, that your life is woven into a fabric of causes and conditions. Gratitude deepens when you realize that this interconnectedness means every action matters, every choice has power, and every moment is alive with possibility. Honoring the Dharma also means honoring those who carried it before you. Gratitude arises when you consider the monks, nuns, teachers, and practitioners who preserved it through wars, famines, and exile. Gratitude deepens when you realize that their sacrifices ensure you can hear these teachings today. To practice the Dharma is to keep their gift alive, to become part of an unbroken chain of gratitude stretching across centuries. The Dharma is a timeless gift because it not only reveals truth, but continually points you back to gratitude itself. Gratitude arises when you realize that every teaching, the impermanence of life, the freedom of non-self, the compassion of the Bodhisattva path, returns you to thankfulness for being alive. Gratitude deepens when you see that the Dharma is not separate from gratitude, but its foundation, its guide, and its expression. As this journey comes to a close, take a moment to feel the quiet truth running through all these teachings. Gratitude is not a single act, not a polite word, but a way of living. It begins with impermanence, the fleeting nature of all things. It deepens through suffering, where hardship becomes a teacher. It expands through interbeing, where you see how life is carried by countless unseen hands. It grows in mindful eating, in the simplicity of daily rhythms, in each breath, in silence, in encounters, in letting go. Gratitude is in waking to a borrowed day, in serving others with joy, in contemplating death as a reminder of life's urgency, in honoring the past, in meeting the present with beginner's mind, in seeing beauty in the ordinary, in dissolving the illusion of self, in receiving the timeless Dharma, in bowing to teachers and ancestors, in cherishing community, in resting in the middle way, and in practicing gratitude as liberation itself. All of these threads weave together into one truth. Today is enough. This moment is enough. Gratitude is not waiting in the future. It is already here, now, quietly asking you to notice. Before you drift into rest, I'd love to hear from you what part of these teachings touched your heart the most tonight. Leave a comment below and share the lesson you're taking with you. And if you'd like more wisdom to guide you into peace, clarity, and gratitude, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. That way, Each new teaching will be here waiting for you, like an old friend returning to remind you of what truly matters. Sleep well, with gratitude in your heart.